All right, here on In the Circle on D1 Softball, powered by 643. It's our tradition. Unlike any others, we continue our sixth annual season preview, in-depth preview. We go through all 31 conferences. No other entity does that. And that including all mid-major conferences, the non-power conferences, however you want to do the definition of it. And the man that'll do it for us for the sixth straight year. This is his 11th season preview show that he has done with us here at In the Circle since this show started way back in 2016. I speak of course, D1 Softball's very own Justin McLeod. Can you believe that?
No, I felt myself aging when you said 11, to be honest. Double digits is a lot.
Yeah, that's why you've Victor and I figured it out. We've done over 1,000 episodes, and you are the most frequent guest. And your first appearance was within the first handful of episodes, because we were previewing the entire 2016 season. And now we've exploded this into where you are on the live show and you're on this show, which also on the podcast feed will include Amanda Scarborough for the last 6 seasons. It's been one of the most downloaded episodes every year, and people always ask about it, and here we are.
If I'm on, now that I'm thinking about the mass exposure, I'm just going to apologize to the people who watch the videos of the live show and the podcast, because that's a lot of exposure to yours truly.
Well, one of the reasons why it's very popular, like I said, we're the only place that breaks down mid-majors like we do. Of course, we have the top 100 mid-majors on D1 Softball Players rankings. We have the top 25 mid-major rankings every week on D1Softball.com, which had the preseason rankings. So we go as in-depth as everybody, and we're the only ones that go in-depth. We've talked to hundreds of coaches about, you name it, we've done it here. So we know what we're doing. We're not just kind of spitballing here. And one of the other reasons why this is a popular deal is because mid-majors are a factor when we get to May. And what's fascinating is this is where you find out, you get firsthand of who are the teams who can make some noise in the sport, in college softball, and cause some havoc. For example, here's the trend. Since 2019, there has been at least one mid-major to make a super regional, except for 1 year, which was 2024, when it had 10 mid-major teams in the regional finals, and in a couple of multiple cases had a team within one win away of the super regionals. In a case of Liberty, they were an out away that year from eliminating Georgia to get to the super regionals. And of course, 2021, you had JMU make it all the way to the World Series there. So that's one of the main reasons why this is a very popular segment of the show, a very popular deal. And I guess my first question to you, Justin, is how is it in this day and age where obviously there's been so much talk about the NIL and the transfer portal and revenue sharing, and you see players leaving, and especially mid-major level, maybe going up to power conferences, and yet you would think mid-majors would be struggling with that, but it seems like they have remained competitive with the power conferences based on postseasons in the month of May. Why is that?
A couple of things. I think, yes, the elitist of the elite is playing a different game to a certain degree in softball as much as any other sport. Like, that's not acknowledging that would be a disservice. When you get to the very highest tier, that absolutely is a thing. Whether that's financially, whether that's just simply resources outside of just straight money, whatever that is, yes, that top tier is that top tier. I think one big thing, though, that has kept schools outside the Power Four relevant. There's other words for it, but relevant, even as college athletics has evolved. But what's kept mid-majors relevant in softball specifically, once you get past that top tier, and it is not some kind of packed top tier, there are a handful of programs on that tier. Once you get past that tier, it's a very different ball game. There's a lot of mix in terms of what's there. Like, you got to think, as much as we talk about the transfer portal and your rev share and NIL and all this kind of stuff, there are SEC programs, there are top tier programs, there are super regional programs, there are top 25 programs, whatever metric you want to put on it, that are going to bat with something similar to what programs outside the top 20 or outside the Power Four are. So you think about a Liberty, You think about a Grand Canyon, you think about a Wichita, a Charlotte, an FAU. You have programs that have history of winning, really good right now, success in the transfer portal, success in developing players in house, some money available of some kind. They're not just sitting there with $0. They're not just getting, free teas and dog sitters. There are programs in the Power Four that are matching that. They're on the same plane. Well, if you're on the same plane, then it comes down to, okay, well, who do I want to play for? Do I want to simply play in SEC stadiums as my home field? Do I want to go somewhere with a coach who I really like, even though their school doesn't play in one of the 4 power conferences? That to me is the biggest piece of it, is that playing field has stayed so largely level outside that very top tier. And then too, like, to your point, I think the stat you just gave is a big part of it. Like, mid-majors have not gone away. Even mid-majors where somebody, their best player goes to a different school in the via the transfer portal, those schools have still stuck around. They've still hung in. They've still won ball games. So, like, that not only is that playing field so largely level, but those schools outside the Power Four have maintained that level. Like, this is not a new thing. This is through the entirety of the last several years as college athletics has changed, as college softball has changed. You've seen mid-majors hang right in. That's the other piece of why, in my mind, is because those mid-major programs have won with what they had. And if you look, 5 years ago, you had Power Four schools poaching, usually via travel ball coaches, to be fair. But you had mid-major players going in the portal because they knew they had spots at Power Four schools. Power Four schools who knew they could fill spots with mid-major stars. Well, now look at it. You have Amaya Johnson, who was in the transfer portal and ultimately decided to go back to Belmont. You have an Autumn Courtney, who, when she left Queens, could have gone really anywhere. She goes to FAU. She stays at a mid-major, and she's a star. You look at kids like that, players like that, that playing field has stayed level, and players like that have chosen to stay there and things like that. So I think those are the two biggest pieces. The playing field is largely level outside that top tier, no matter what else. And those mid-majors have hung in. They've done well. They've performed well. Like, we just went through how many schools that have been steady. Like, that matters.
Right. Where the impact that we've seen is the numbers of at-large mid-majors has dropped, which I think is more about realignment than anything else, because they've lost a lot of programs that were like UCF, for example, who's been a perennial NCAA tournament program, is now in the Big 12. There's other examples of that where teams are, that used to be mid-majors are no longer the case. So the at-large number is down, but what's interesting is the teams that are getting in as the automatic bid is doing well, like I mentioned, by these stats. And I think some people might look at it, but wait a minute, where are where's the World Series appearances? Really, that's been kind of quietly long gone for a while. Like, before JMU, Justin, you got to go way back to find a mid-major making the World Series. This ain't college baseball where you do see mid-majors pop up in Omaha every other year. Softball hasn't been like that now for maybe a couple decades, in my opinion. I don't know if you agree or not.
I think it's beyond that, though, because if you look at the World Series in general, you could, outside of teams who burst onto the scene with a blank checkbook, like that's a thing now. So, I mean, we're just going to call it what it is. Outside of situations like that, you probably have, for the last 15 years, 20 schools that you look at and say that's a World Series team. Even JMU, if you think about it, in that same span, they had a couple of super regionals in there during the Jalen Ford, Megan Good years. So JMU making it in 21, a surprise, sure. But if JMU would have been in that group, if you said throw a couple of mid-majors in there, JMU would have been in there. So even that one was not a super anomaly. Like, and that's including a ton of Power Four schools. Like, if you look at even conferences like the SEC and the ACC and the Big 10 and the Big 12, the Power Fours, like, once you get past 5, maybe 6 schools, that's not a thing. Like, if you look at the SEC, and I'm not dogging anybody when I say this, but it does belay the point. If you look at the SEC, you're not counting Mississippi State. You're not counting Kentucky. You're not counting South Carolina. You're not counting probably Missouri or Texas A&M. Right there, you've just cut off a third of the SEC that if you said these are World Series teams that you would not include over a span of a decade and a half. ACC, Big 10, Big 12, same thing. So, like, I think that's the thing, too. Yeah, mid majors haven't gotten there. There's not a lot of variety in who gets there, if we're going to be dead honest. And that's not because.
No, that's a great point. Right. That's correct.
There's not a lot of variety just in general, much less trickling down that far.
Right. Like Oklahoma's pretty much taken up a spot. So you're really down to 7 spots over this last decade, right? And so
Oklahoma State 5 years in a row, right? It was a guarantee.
Texas with under Mike White has become now a legitimate contender. Florida with Tim Walton. So really, right there, that's almost half the field. Right
Florida
there,
State every other year practically.
Correct. And like I said, I think you got to go back to Louisiana before like JMU as far as teams mid majors World Series. It just isn't as frequent from that standpoint. So I think it's fair to ask this question because this is a question that was brought up on the Sunday night show, season preview on the YouTube channel. So it's the question, and I've kind of modified it because it used to be, hey, who's this year's JMU, right? That was the question we would ask every year after they made the run to the World Series. But I think that's unfair because it's hard, as we've proven, it's hard to get to the World Series. But my thing is, if a mid-major makes a super regional, you're automatically a team that could make it to the World Series. So to me, that's the same comp thing. Liberty was that team last year, knocked off A&M number 1. So my thing is, who is this year's Liberty / JMU, however you want a terminology, be the team that you're like, hey, don't be surprised if this team ends up in a super regional and maybe is a win away from Oklahoma City or somehow gets there, but at minimum is right there knocking on the door in the super regional. Who is that?
How many are you going to let me list? Because I can't say just one.
Wow, name as many as you'd like. Go for it.
I can tell you that there are probably genuinely 6 schools that when you say
6,
I think there are 6 that if you told me Team A, Team B, Team C, Team D, Team E, Team F is in a super regional, I could say, okay, got it. I think for me, those 6 probably portion off a little bit, probably 3 and 3. So top tier of those 6, FAU, who I think is probably the most complete team outside the Power 4 going into the year. Senior filled, deep pitching staff of workable pitchers. Like they've got 7 pitchers. There's 4, but honestly, probably 5 that I could see getting a good chunk of work. You don't see that outside the Power 4 very often. So I think they're the most complete team coming in. Grand Canyon, just because that's Grand Canyon. They have most of their returners are like, they have a couple of pieces that obviously they lost. Megan Golden, they lost. But with what they have returning, I think Grand Canyon's in that spot. And then, yes, Liberty. It's the fighting Doc Richardsons, if we're going to be honest. I have questions about Liberty, who's going to step up to be the ace of the staff, who's going to step up to take Rachel Roop's spot. But Doc Richardson. Like, that's the eternal caveat with Liberty. So, to me, those are the 3 that I have the most faith in. Liberty obviously did it last year. Grand Canyon obviously has been in the regional final within the last couple of years. And then FAU, you know what? In the postseason, sure, they haven't done great. But what they have done is they've been consistent winners. And when you're consistent winners, who knows? So if you told me FAU's in a super regional, I'd be like, oh, okay. Their pitching staff you came through. The offense did what they were capable of. Like, it's an easy recipe for me to understand. Second half of those 6, I look at a Coastal Carolina, which I'm sure you probably didn't expect me to say, but when I look at the schedule Coastal Carolina is playing, they're playing a lot of teams that are going to be in the regionals and are going to challenge and be in the super regionals. You're playing them during the regular season. They're going to be tested against those teams. So the idea of a Coastal Carolina facing off against South Carolina or Duke or Georgia or whatever in a regional at one of those places is not going to scare them. So you've checked that box, which is key when you get to the postseason. 2, they've got some key offensive pieces, both back and newly added. We know Coastal hits a lot of home runs. Like that's the thing. We know that the ball flies in Conway. but Coastal's got a lot of key pieces on offense returning, and then they filled in some of the holes they have with newcomers. The third piece of Coastal is they don't know what their pitching staff's going to look like. Nicolette Picone is gone. She was pitcher of the year last year, led them to the regional, she's gone. So you're like, okay, you're crazy. They don't even know what their pitching staff's going to look like. What I do see is a pitching staff that has 4, maybe more pitchers that could be worthwhile arms. If 3 of those 4 develop into worthwhile arms, that's a team that can win a regional. So I look at Coastal and you say, okay, well, the pitching staff isn't complete. You don't know what you're getting. No, I don't. But I absolutely see a recipe where what I'm getting is a couple or 3 reliable arms and a team that's battle tested against genuinely great competition. So Coastal's on that list for me. This is a long answer to a short question. I get that, but I know you weren't expecting to hear Coastal. You probably were not expecting to hear Omaha. Maddie Agroff is the chief there. Like we all know, Maddie Agroff, one of the best pitchers in mid-majors, one of the best pitchers in the country. She's the headliner. But here's my thing about Omaha. It's kind of similar to what I said about Coastal in terms of being battle tested. But this Omaha team, in this run they've had the last 3 years, where they're winning at least a game in regionals, where they're eliminating teams in regionals, where they're making the winners bracket at an SEC home ballpark. Like things like you just don't see most teams do, much less mid-major teams do. In that span, Omaha has not won a Summit League regular season title all on their own. Closest they've come is they finally shared a Summit League regular season title last year with St. Thomas. They do their best work in the postseason. So if you told me in May that this Omaha team is in a super regional, led by Maddie Agroff, with an offense full of veteran returners, added a Taylor Sedlacek to it and her power bat. If you sat here and told me that Omaha was in a super regional, I'd go, okay. I see the recipe. The recipe is easy there. And then I think the other one for me is Texas State out of the Sun Belt. I mean, that's 2 Sun Belt teams. I think the Sun Belt's really wacky, so I could see that one going off kilter, Coastal or Texas State, just because the conference is so wild at this point, last couple of years. But Texas State is reliable. Ricky Woodard knows how to win. They've beaten some big teams. They play a lot of big teams regularly. They have what I was talking about with Coastal on an every year basis. The one thing about Texas State is they don't have as much depth as I'd like to see. Maddie Azua, solid number 1 arm. Emma Stroud right there with her. I don't know how much faith I have in those arms in the postseason, but what Texas State does have is a history of winning. So if you told me they're 6th on my list of 6, but if you told me Texas State's in a super, okay, I see the recipe for that. The veterans, the experience, the history of winning, got it, understood. So FAU, Liberty, Grand Canyon, Coastal Carolina, Omaha, Texas State are probably my 6 top of the heap. Where if you told me they're in a super, I'm like, okay, easy, got it, understood. There are probably some others that could get there, but it would be something kind of along the way where you're like, oh, yeah, this happened. Okay, got it. Preseason, those 6, you told me they're in a super, I'm on board. I get it. Makes sense to me.
If you're watching on the YouTube, it's no coincidence. The top preseason, mid-major top 25 rankings. FAU's 1, Liberty 2, Grand Canyon 3, Texas State 4, Omaha 5, Coastal Carolina 6. So backing up your point there. Coastal Carolina, it would be fitting because a year ago in baseball, Coastal Carolina was a win away from were played in the National Championship Series. So that's kind of been the interesting correlation. There's a team you didn't mention that I would include, but I will save that when we get to their conference preview there that I think would not shock me on that list. I have some, but I think you make a good, compelling case for all 6. I can't disagree with any of that. Let me ask you real quick here. This committee this year is seeding 32 teams. Can that help the mid-majors? I think of a Florida Atlantic, for example, who's obviously been going to Gainesville. That's the only place they can bust to. I know there are caveats, which we're not going to get into with the 32 seats. We have all year to get into all that. But in theory now, Justin, a Florida Atlantic, or I'll throw in a Coastal Carolina, a Texas State, isn't automatic, we know where they're going to go. In theory, they could go somewhere brand new because of the 32 seeds. I know there's caveats. I've talked to many coaches. They're skeptical on this. I don't want to dive into that right now because we got a lot to cover. But could that help the mid majors, you think, or you think it's going to be really it's not really that big of a help?
The one place that I think it categorically does help is it at least opens the door for teams to play different teams. Like, think about the best example I can give is Liberty last year. Should Liberty, based on their RPI and based on their positioning, have gone to Texas A&M to the number 1 seed, basically as what would be the 32 seed? No. But the one thing that did for Liberty, and I've said this throughout the summer, I've had these conversations with people through much of the offseason, was that a fair draw for where Liberty was? No, strictly by the numbers. What it was, though, was it was a chance for Liberty to get out of that 400-mile radius, to get out from one of those teams that it seems like they play every year, whether it's Duke or South Carolina or Georgia or whatever, to get out of that bubble and just simply play somebody new. So if you think about what we've always said, anytime there was a team within that 400-mile radius, it's always been an automatic. As long as the team was good enough to get a 2 seed or was above a 3, was above a 4 seed to be a 3 seed or whatever, it was automatic. It had to happen. The one thing that seeding 32 in my mind categorically does is it simply allows for some differences. Those caveats you talked about are there. How many are we going to see where somebody goes someplace different? We don't know. And we're not going to know until we get into March, April, and May and see where how good these teams are. You still got to win. But the thing is, like, you use an FAU going to Gainesville. It's the only place they can bus. Texas State, sitting in the state of Texas, you can bus to a couple of potential hosts. But what happens if FAU's really good? What happens if Texas State's really good? What happens if Coastal Carolina's really good? Well, guess what, FAU? You're really good. You don't have to go to Gainesville. Guess what, Texas State? You're really good. You don't have to stay in the state of Texas. You're going somewhere that matches a team that is on the appropriate other side of the coin there. Guess what, Coastal Carolina? You had a really good year. You don't have to automatically go to South Carolina or bus to Duke or to Georgia or whatever. Yeah, you may go across the country, but it's because somebody across the country matched up well, seed-wise, with how well you perform. And the thing is, when those teams know one another, sure, is there a time where an FAU can sneak something out against a Florida or a Texas State can sneak something out against a Texas? Absolutely. We've seen it. But you shouldn't have to. And the one thing that seeding 32 does is it opens the door. Doesn't mean everybody's going to get to walk through it, but it opens the door for a team like that to be able to be matched up based on merit, not just on geography. And that to me is the one and probably the only categorical thing is it opens the door. And once that door is open, who knows what happens?
I agree. It does help because I've talked to many coaches that the problem is with the regionalization, like Texas State. Texas knows Texas State's material. They know the roster. They know the personnel. They play. So even though Texas State is familiar with Texas, let's be real, Texas is the more talented team. So I think it favors them. Whereas you brought up Liberty. A&M has never played Liberty. Like they're not as familiar with Dot's tendencies as, say, for example, a Duke is or a Clemson is. I've witnessed it firsthand. Think of South Florida recently with Georgina Corrick. Can you imagine if Georgina Corrick was placed in a regional where nobody has ever faced Georgina Corrick? Well, unfortunately for them, they got placed at Florida, for example, that one year. Well, Florida's seen Corrick a bunch of times. So not that it's easy. And again, there's obviously variations of that, but I do think it helps the mid-majors. Like, I'll be honest, if we didn't have 32 seeds, Justin, this year, I probably would say there's that number of 6, or in my case, I have another one in mind. I probably would shrink it just because of well, I like FAU, but that would be my line because we already know where they're going.
Well, and here's the thing, too. Use Texas State as the best example. The one thing that as part of that plays into it is it's almost a catch-22 for some teams, like Texas State. You have to play Texas. You have to play Baylor. You have to play A&M, whoever, because beating those teams is what it's going to take for you to be looked at for an at-large bid. But, if you make that postseason with an at-large bid, you're going right there. Like, it's almost a catch-22. You have to play them to better your case, But then if you make the postseason, you're going right back to a team that's already played you. And seeding the 32 doesn't take that away by any stretch, but it at least opens the door for that to not be the only thing there. So
No doubt.
now, Ricky Woodard can play Texas, can play Baylor, can play A&M, whatever. And if her team is good enough, they're not absolutely going back there. It's not the resignation of, yeah, let's enjoy it now because we're going to see them again in a month and a half. If your team is good enough, if the numbers are there, you're not automatically going back. That's the extra piece of that, but it's back to the same thing that it opens the door. Who knows how many will walk through it or will get to walk through it, but it at least opens the door.
All right, let's get to going on the conferences. We're going to start now, folks. We're going to go in the order of the conferences and their RPI ranking from a year ago. So if you follow us, and I know some of you do follow this very closely, we'll go conference by conference. Some we're going to be spending more time than others, quite frankly, because otherwise, we'd be here forever. So just those are some of the rules. Some of these I'm just going to ask Justin questions. Some of these I might throw my 2 cents. He might ask me something. Who knows? We'll go with it. Let's start with the American. FAU, you mentioned the favorites there. I want to start with this. Autumn Courtney. We talked this in the Power Conference previews. Nyjah, Carlin Pickens, okay, and Jordy Fromm, which I'm still getting used to it. That's why I paused, because I'm not 100% confident in my abilities to remember this. As the big three there, that's going to be a very big topic because they're all going to be, possibly in the mix for the number 1 pick in the AUSL, et cetera, et cetera. In the mid-majors in our top 100, the graphic was Maya Johnson from Belmont, Autumn Courtney, and Madia Groff from Omaha. Tell me about why you have Autumn Courtney. Is this the equivalent, those three, are they the equivalent in the mid-majors to the Power Conference version that I brought up?
I think there is an equivalency, yeah. I think the thing about Autumn Courtney for me is starts her career at Queens, a program just coming up from Division II into Division I. Queens just flat out just not very good, not very successful, still readjusting to D1 life, et cetera, et cetera. They don't have a lot at their disposal from a facilities perspective either. So I'm not dissing them. It just is how it is. But the one thing about Autumn Courtney, she mowed down the competition. Freshman year, mowed down the competition. Sophomore year, people have film on her. Great, still mowed down the competition. Goes in the transfer portal, picks Florida Atlantic. At that point, Florida Atlantic, yeah, they were a conference champion. They'd won one, third-year head coach at that point, whatever. She goes in. She's the ace of the FAU staff. Guess what she does? She mows down the competition. Shock and surprise. I think that she's pitcher of the year. She's an All-American. FAU wins another conference title. She's part of that one, so she gets a ring now, all that kind of stuff. So going into her senior year now, and you talked about that big three, I absolutely think that big three there's an equivalency there. And I absolutely think Autumn Courtney is a key piece of that. I think she's one of the best pitchers in the country. She's absolutely one of the best pitchers, top 3, outside the Power 4. She's also now the chief of a bullpen that's about as deep as anybody's. And the one key piece of that is if that bullpen turns out to be as reliable and dependable as it could be, what you could be looking at by virtue of that is an Autumn Courtney that by the time the postseason comes around is fresher and as rejuvenated as anything in May as she was in February. And if that happens, that's part of that recipe I was talking about earlier, look out opposition. She's stellar. Like I don't know how many adjectives you want me to throw on it, but Autumn Courtney is just stellar. And she stepped well into a leadership role in that bullpen at FAU. She stepped into the bullpen of a team that had just won a championship, and it flowed. She stepped into a leadership role, and that bullpen got better. Sometimes you bring in a star, and okay, who knows, this is the star or whatever. That bullpen flowed last year. Autumn Courtney ends up as an All-American. Oh, by the way, you got Ainsley Lambert over here, who is I think is going to, give it a few years, she's going to be one of those players that people look back on, kind of like Kurt Flood in free agency in Major League Baseball. Lambert, Bella Sargent at South Florida are going to be a couple of those players that people look at when pitching staffs and true relievers are a regular thing in softball. These are a couple of those players, and Lambert's one of them that people are going to look at. she was already there. Autumn Courtney steps in, didn't disrupt that. That pitching staff flowed. So I think Courtney's stellar. Autumn Courtney's stellar. And she's going to lead that bullpen again. And I think she's going to do it well.
Of course, Lambert, the closer. And you feel they got enough depth pitching. Offensively, they set a lot of school records. Offensively, they got Jessiana Mora back, who's one of the best two-way players in the sport there. Could be maybe a challenger for American Conference Player of the Year. Maybe the best position player that nobody talks about in the mid-majors there. Kylie Hammonds. I mean, Corey, you got Yates and company. I remember they scored 8 runs against Florida in the winner's bracket game. They just didn't have the arms to slow down that Florida offense. But you believe this year's they have. Who are the arms other than Autumn Courtney that you think will step in, not name Ainsley Lambert or Autumn Courtney?
Not Autumn Courtney. You got Ainsley Lambert. You've got Jaden Martinez, who I think could be solid. I've seen her be solid against some opponents. So I know she's got it in her. Got decent velo in there. I think she's more of like a Saturday starter, etc., in conference kind of thing. But you've got Jaden Martinez. She's a senior. Madison Ensko, you mentioned being a two-way player. Madison Ensko, the transfer from NC State's in there. So she's a senior. So that's 4 seniors right there at the top of the pitching staff. And then you have 3 freshmen. McKenna Lee is a freshman that I saw play in travel ball. I think she's really solid. I think she might actually get some innings even with 4 seniors on staff. And then you've got Ashlyn Durkin and Madeline Bird. I actually buy a little bit of what Jordan Clark's selling when she says all 7 will get some work. Do I think everybody's going to get, 70 innings? Well, no, there's not going to be 70 innings for everybody to get. But I actually do see a world where all 7, situationally, maybe some matchups that are favorable, at least see the circle. If that happens, that's the best case scenario. That's any coach's dream, much less a mid-major coach's dream. But I think the thing for me is it's not just depth. I think you actually have some quality arms. Ensko, she didn't get a lot of work at NC State, and her ERA wasn't amazing, but I think she can be solid, and I really think she can be solid if she's doing well on both sides of the ball. I think it's the best case scenario. Lambert, she is solid. We've seen it. Courtney, I just waxed poetic. Not really poetic, but I did my best. Martinez, if she is the good Jaden Martinez, can be solid. Throw in the freshman. You've got 7 arms, even if 4 of them, even if 5 of them throw with some level of regularity. Again, it's every coach's dream in this day and age. An actual pitching staff with that more than 1 or 2 arms you can rely on. Best case scenario.
Who is the biggest threat to FAU? First of all, the American, of course, number 5 conference last year. It has been consistently a multi-bid league this decade. No other mid-major conference could say that. And the last 2 years, FAU's won the regular season title. They've had different conference tournament champions. South Florida was the tournament champion last year as the host. The year before that, it was Charlotte that won the tournament title. Who's the biggest threat to FAU in the league? And could be maybe a team that's that second bid, maybe 3 bids. I know some of the coaches in the league. I talked to every coach in the American. I know you have as well. They thought maybe they were a 3-bid league last year, North Texas being the first 4 out. Who knows what would have happened if they would have held on in that championship game against South Florida. But who is the biggest threats to FAU in the American?
For me, I like South Florida. I like Charlotte. I mean, South Florida was there last year. They've lost a couple of key pieces in a Josie Foreman behind the plate and Peyton Dixon in the circle. Bella Sarge is back. I referenced her earlier. That's a good returner for them. That's a very key returner. They also added Carly Ernst, the transfer pitcher from Hofstra. Spent her freshman year up at Hofstra. And let's be honest, Ken Erickson's got a good track record with pitchers. So I look at Ernst, solid first year at Hofstra. I'm like, okay. I can see the potential of Erickson doing something extra with her, going the next step with her taking the next step. Got some key offensive returners there at South Florida. So you bring back a good portion, at least, of the group that got South Florida where they were last year. And let's be honest, I didn't expect South Florida to be as good as they were last year, but they were consistent. They overcame a couple of bad losses along the way, honestly, and they got the job done in the tournament. Charlotte, for me, might be a little bit of the sleeper in the conference. Jenna Lord kind of became the known commodity very quickly last year. Player of the year, hit all kinds of bombs. I forget the number. I think it was 20, 22, something like that. Charlotte found their power stroke, just parking home runs and all that. The weak point was the pitching staff. I think the pitching staff is still the weak point, between the pitching staff and the offense, but I think it has the chance to be stronger. If the pitching staff is stronger for Charlotte, maybe they hang in a few more games, 5 more games than they did last year. Maybe a couple of close losses flip the other way. To me, that's the recipe for Charlotte to be closer to 2024 Charlotte than 2025 Charlotte. If the pitching staff keeps them in 5 more games, 7 more games, a couple of those results from last year flip, I think they're right there. I mean, I can't not say Wichita just because Christy Breadbinder's a winner. Like, she knows. I think I said the same
thing. They're kind of a mystery team, though. They're a mystery.
That's exactly right. Like, similar to what I said with Ricky Woodard, similar to what I said with Doc Richardson, I'm saying about Christy Breadbinner. That team at Wichita, and anybody who's read some of what I think I've written the stat like 3 times already this offseason. I'm not done quoting it because it's become my favorite stat. Not a single player on the Wichita roster has been there longer than 1 year. They're either rising sophomores, transfers who got there last year, true freshmen, or transfers who got there this year. That's the roster. You have upperclassmen, but they didn't start there. They've only been there a year or less. The thing that is for me is Wichita has not been Wichita the last couple of years. You can kind of see that. They've gotten past in the conference race. That stat I just gave you tells me this is a reset. This is you hit the red button. Well, a Christy Breadbinner team that has hit the red button is a Christy Breadbinner team I know I don't want to face. They are a mystery team on largely every side of the ball. I can point out this player who's solid in this area and this player who's solid over there, but they are a mystery team. If you polled the other coaches in the American Conference, I guarantee you the majority of them would not want to face a Christy Breadbinner mystery team. So I don't have Wichita in that tier of who's going to challenge FAU, but I'd be remiss not to say they certainly could, because a Christy Breadbinner team is not one I'm betting against.
There's 3 teams to me that will determine how strong the American is, like as far as being a great league versus a good league. You mentioned one of them, Wichita State. I think North Texas is another mystery team. New coach, basically a new roster. What are we expecting there?
Yep.
And then Tulsa, who's had some injuries. Macy Cole had a great year. They got Skaggs, more and more. They got some veterans that played in that 2023 American Conference Championship game in Tampa that lost to UCF. They were on the bubble in 24. What's your thoughts on those 3? Because to me, I think that's going to tell the story of the American and how strong and deep this league is.
I think you're right, because I think the thing that has hurt the American the last couple of years, and truth be told, has taken away a lot of the comparisons of a lower ACC or Big Ten at-large versus a potential for an extra American at-large, is that right there, the depth of the middle of the conference. Every conference has bad teams at the bottom or teams with poor records at the bottom. Every conference does. In the SEC, they get into the tournament anyway, but that's another story. The thing for me is that mid-pack, and actually I'm going to throw in East Carolina and even UAB into that. Like, I think that whole mid-pack is key to the strength of the American, because it doesn't matter who it is. You have to have 2/3 of that conference with obvious strength. Now, does that mean you got to go in and Wichita's got to beat Oklahoma and Tulsa's got to beat Oklahoma State and East Carolina's got to beat Stanford and UAB's got to sweep Auburn, whatever else? No. You have to win some of those games. Somebody besides FAU, South Florida, Charlotte has to win some key games, some big games. But the strength of that mid-pack in the American, start with Wichita. So say Wichita's at the 4 spot right there. So go 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. You have to have 4 of those 5 teams right there have got to have strength. So I'm going to add those extra ones to that pile, because if Tulsa's weak, which I don't think they will, I think they'll be better. I mean, you and I have talked about that off air. But like, let's say Tulsa's weak, but East Carolina is strong. Great. That gives the American that same strength. A UAB team pulls off some wins against SEC teams in midweek games, but, North Texas does not. Different story. At that point, it's that same strength is there no matter where it comes from. So we talk about the teams that are legacy solid teams in the American, and that works. But I think it boils down to two-thirds of the American have to be solid, have to be strong, whoever they are. That's the recipe that the American gets a solid 2 and maybe even 3 bids into the tournament. That's at least the recipe.
My last question before we move on to the next conference. We have Jenna Lord ranked as the best position player, maybe best hitter in mid-majors. What makes her the best mid-major hitter player in the league, and who do you think is a threat to her in the American, if not nationally?
The thing for me with Jenna Lord is I think last year, because Jenna Lord was a prized recruit. She was a touted recruit way back when. And Charlotte's her fourth school. I do think though that last year at Charlotte was for the first time the chance that she had to truly thrive, whether that's injuries, whether that's just situationally, whatever else, positions, whatever else. I think last year was the chance she had to thrive, and guess what? She did. So I think that's the thing for me with Jenna Lord is she stepped up. There was no pressure. You're on your fourth school. Nobody's paying attention. All of a sudden, people should be paying attention, and you're proving that to them. Who's the biggest challenge to her in the conference? Assuming we're taking pitchers out of the equation, yeah, there's plenty of candidates at FAU. You could look at a Jessiana Mora, but you could show me a Chloe Yates behind the plate. You could show me a Kylie Hammonds in center field. You could show me a Destiny Johns up the middle, and I could see a recipe where any of those get there. I think anybody in that group of mystery at Wichita. You could tell me somebody from Wichita comes through. Couldn't tell you who I think it might be. Alsha Moore, maybe the North Texas transfer. I think she's got some potential there. But I do though. I look at North Texas and I look at an Elizabeth Moffitt, for instance. She was an all-region kid last year. Went in the portal. Cody White got there to North Texas. She came out of the portal. Went back to North Texas to finish. I could see somebody like that, especially if she stepped up into a leadership role just on the offense in general. I could see her thriving. Oh, by the way, there's somebody named Madison Conley down there at North Texas who I think could be really poised to take on a bigger national profile. I'll put it that way. So I think North Texas has got a couple of players that I could see doing it. I'll even stretch down to a Tulsa type where you have a Clara Skaggs who wasn't fully healthy last year. And now should be at some point this year. But she's a solid player. She's steady. She's not super flashy, but she's steady. Right there on the left side with her, you've got Macy Cole. So if you told me one of those two on the left side of the infield at Tulsa was a breakout star and had a shot at player of the year, okay, kind of what I said earlier, like I see the recipe for that. That's the thing about the American too, though, is I feel like the talent has been spread out, but not at the expense of the top teams. Like the top teams have retained mass amounts of talent, and the teams in the middle of the pack, at least record-wise, have also held on to talent. So the talent pool has expanded, but not at the expense of the top teams and the talent level of those top teams.
Of course, if you widen it to the national stage, perhaps the best player that challenges Jenna Lord is one Savannah Kirk of Grand Canyon, who will be spending their first year as official member of the Mountain West, Justin, who was the number 6 conference last year. They add Grand Canyon, so that's a big plus to strengthen their league. That's the positive. The negative is this is a one-and-done conference, as we know it. They're going to split apart. Some are going to stay in the Mountain West. Some are going to this new Pac-12, I guess. Kind of explain this, first of all. What is in store for the Mountain West? Because this will be a one-and-done Mountain West season, but yet there's a lot of potential and upside there.
So there is, and I think that's the thing that's going to be interesting. So Grand Canyon's in, and this is a year earlier than anticipated, to be fair. It wasn't planned to be a one and done like this, but that's what it's going to be. And then you have San Diego State, Fresno State, Boise, Utah State, all leaving to go to the new Pac-12, which is going to be its own crazy thing. Luckily, we don't have to talk about that until next year's preview. But so the thing about it, though, is this is a little bit of a mid-major super conference to a degree, just because you have a Grand Canyon that had become the team in the WAC. And truth be told, by and large, the last 4 years, it wasn't particularly close. in the WAC. Now they're in the Mountain West. They're predicted in the coaches poll to win the Mountain West. Was not a unanimous pick, but they're predicted to win it. They've been strong. They've got great talent. They've got a great talent pool. Then you have a Nevada, who, oh, by the way, is one of the ones staying. So when this new conference takes over, or when those teams leave for the new Pac-12 and the new look of the conference is final, I mean, Grand Canyon and Nevada are going to be the top two, then too. Crazy concept. That's a Nevada team. Remember, though, they burst onto the scene to a certain degree last year. Like they won the regular season, first year head coach with Victoria Hayward. Haley McLean's there. Offense looks like what it does. Aaliyah Jenkins has a career year. So that's a Nevada team that has been there and is staying, but is still kind of new to the scene of true contention in the conference, if we're going to be honest. They were close for a couple of years. They were in that top tier, they're top of the pack, if you will. Pun slightly intended. But that's still a new team. Like when you think of the Mountain West the last decade, you don't think of Nevada. So I think that's one thing that's interesting to me about the Mountain West this year is it is this super conference right now, but the teams that are trending upward, or I guess trending the most directly upward going into this season, are the teams that are staying. Historically, traditionally, San Diego State, Fresno State, Boise State is what you feel like is the upholding the standard for the Mountain West. Those programs are still solid. Right now, it's Grand Canyon and Nevada coming into the year that are the favorites. Those are the teams that probably have the best cores returning. That they're both, I mean, Grand Canyon brand new, Nevada pretty new, but they both have championships. No matter what the conference's listing on the ring is, they're both coming off championship seasons. So I think that's the thing that's interesting to me about this 1 year of a Mountain West Super Conference is the teams that are trending the most directly upward for this 1 year, entering this 1 year, are the teams that are sticking around, not the ones that are leaving.
Can the Mountain West be a multiple bid league? It's just been that close. Last year, Nevada was the first four out. They were upset in the Mountain West tournament. San Diego State won the tournament. They got in. San Diego State has some pitching questions this year. Very young team with Stacy Newman, especially in the circle. Nevada has some questions offensively with the graduation of Aaliyah Jenkins and among other departures there. How do you kind of see those two teams with Grand Canyon? Because those are the three teams that are certainly going to be in the mix and probably have the odds-on favorites to at least threaten to make the NCAA tournament and be conference champions contenders.
Can they be a multi-bid league? Yes. I think the recipe is a little more detailed for the Mountain West than it is for an American type. Part of that is the fact that the American has gotten multiple bids the last couple of years. There's that championship history, or that tournament history, if you will. I think the biggest thing for me, though, is strength of schedule. Like, that's a problem for a lot of Mountain West teams beyond a certain point. And here's the thing. If you look at the top tier of the Mountain West, and let's just take those three teams, Grand Canyon, Nevada, San Diego State. Nevada last year, just barely on the outside looking in of the NCAA tournament. The biggest complaint about Nevada's resume last year was their strength of schedule. Well, Victoria Hayward shored that up this year. She's got quite a few solid opponents on the schedule. Got to win some of those games. Can't just play them. But if the Wolfpack wins some of those games, they're going to have an at-large resume that's pretty solid. Grand Canyon, on the other hand, has a schedule that I do not like. The opponents on Grand Canyon's schedule, you don't have a lot of great of top-tier RPI opponents. You don't have the main major Power 4 opponents. You've got three. They're all midweeks. Arizona and Arizona State, same as ever. And then Oklahoma State, while they're in town, is part of conference play. They're just coming a couple of days early, play Grand Canyon. Those are Grand Canyon's three biggest opponents. Outside of that, you're talking about mid to lower tier Big Ten and ACC teams who may slightly help your RPI if they pull off some wins in conference play. So right as Nevada fixes their strength of schedule issue, in my mind, Grand Canyon causes one of their own. Like, this is a Grand Canyon team that I think is really good. I gave you the case earlier for them being in a super, the recipe for it. It's also a Grand Canyon team that you could tell me has 45 wins on Selection Sunday and does not have a case to make the postseason as an at-large. Like, those two things exist at once. And it's not unfair. Like, I understand people don't like RPI for this reason or that reason, but Grand Canyon's schedule, outside of conference play, 3 games. You go and win 2 of those games, you go 2-1 against the Big 12, got a case. 2 wins against those specific teams, you got a case. But if you don't, it's iffy. And then you have a San Diego State team that does have some games that certainly will boost their chances at an at-large. But you've also got a San Diego State team that has questions. If it takes San Diego State a minute to solve those to answer those questions, and then they're just solid down the stretch, that's not always the recipe for success. And it's not just because they're on the West Coast and nobody sees them. People do see San Diego State. San Diego State probably has the most exposure of a lot of those teams on the West Coast because they have a tournament history. But if it takes San Diego State a minute to get acclimated, maybe a minute to get situated with what their pitching looks like or with what their team's going to be made of this year, chance for an at-large, it doesn't go out the window by any stretch, but certainly it gets a little chancier the later you get to start winning big games or playing tight against big opponents.
Mountain West tournament will be in Reno. Who is this year's Aaliyah Jenkins that was always good, but people took notice last year, and of course she won Player of the Year? Who's that in the Mountain West?
I mean, I assume you're not going to let me say Savannah Kirk since you've talked about her already.
Correct.
But
yes.
I am going to go to Grand Canyon, and I'm going to say Jada Cooper. I think she was really solid to open her career at GCU, and I think she's an important piece of that lineup. And if Grand Canyon is going to make a run at the Mountain West title in their first year, in this super conference year, I think she's going to be a key piece of that. So I'm only going to give you one answer to a one-person question, and I'm going to say Jada Cooper.
Give me a team other those 3 that you're intrigued by in this Mountain West, because I think that's the one thing that's holding the Mountain West back is some of the middle and the bottom. Boise State's very young this year with Justin Schultz. Charlotte Morgan, new head coach at Fresno State, kind of restarting there, rebuilding there, taking over for Stacey May. Who's a team you're intrigued by other than those big 3, we'll call it, in the Mountain West?
I think the thing about the Mountain West in the second and third tiers is it gets really interesting for me. Since you're pinning me down, I'm gonna say Fresno. I want to be clear. I'm not picking Fresno to be like the 4th team in the conference and have a chance at that top tier. I think that top tier is going to stand pretty well alone. Truth be told, prediction wise, that's my predictions. I think those top 3 are going to be the top 3 steadily. But I think Fresno's intriguing just because I could see a recipe where they're solid. I could see a recipe where they're a solid club with decent production, where some step-out performers, and they are a factor in the Mountain West race. So I'm going to say Fresno in that space. I think Boise, to me, is so young, so new. I think a Utah State, to me, I could see a recipe for it, but I need them to prove to me that they're a contender before I crown them as a team to watch. And then I think like a UNLV that I see some talent there, but I need consistency. Like, I don't know, going into any year, I don't know if I'm getting a UNLV that's going to win, 30 games and go, win 15 or 18 games in conference or lose 15, 18 games in conference. I never know what I'm getting no matter the talent. So I'm going to go Fresno just because they've got some roster pieces that I find pretty intriguing entering the year.
Couple names to watch. Haley McLean, Nevada. Has to be big for them, I think. Could be the best pitcher in the conference. If it's not, maybe it's her or Batterton. But, Grand Canyon's unique because they use a staff approach. They don't burn a lot of innings, which is why a lot of times their pitchers don't get recognized in postseason awards because in some cases they're just not eligible, right?
Yep.
So I think that's an interesting factor there. And I think San Diego State, man, I'm intrigued by them because they're so young, but that staff, Stacy, they always figure it out. Julie Holcomb's a name to watch. And then when I talked to Coach Newman, really raved about Caleb Pollard.
Mm-hmm. I think Caleb Pollard's interesting, though, because you got to think, and I'm sure somebody just heard you say that and maybe heard me say that, and you're like, okay, I recognize that name. It's Caleb Pollard who started at Florida, transferred to Oregon, transferred to San Diego State, hasn't played in a couple of years because of the timing of those transfers and things like that. So, the thing is, she was at Florida and at Oregon, and San Diego State picked her up for a reason. She's got talent. We also haven't seen her on the field in a couple of years. So, I get why Stacey Newman's high on her. And if she is still what she was a couple of years ago, talent wise, like if the time off of actual game action hasn't hurt her, she's got a right to be high on her, and she could be a difference maker.
I mean, that's the landscape now. In 20, sometimes it takes a couple skills. Things go a certain way there. Excuse me. There, Bubba Nichols, new assistant there. Leah Jenkins, an assistant at Nevada. Some other notes there in the Mountain West. Let's go on to the Sun Belt. It was the 7th best conference last year, and it was arguably the wackiest conference.
Mm-hmm.
Like, top to bottom on a weekly basis. You didn't know what was up, what was down, anything. Do you expect it to be that kind of wacky, or do you think it'll be more stable this year in the Sun Belt?
No, I think that I don't know that it'll be that wacky, to be fair, but I do think there's going to be a lot more tumult, a lot more upheaval in the Sun Belt, very similar to last year, just because I think at this point, like Texas State is the standard bearer. That's easily clear. Has been for a few years now. I know some fan bases will disagree with that. It's true. Sorry. But Texas State's also leaving. Like we referenced the new Pac-12. That's where Texas State is headed. This is their last year in the Sun Belt.
I'm still in denial about that. I'm glad you brought that up because I'm still in denial on that.
Well, but it becomes interesting too because right now Texas State is the standard bearer. What happens when they leave? I'm going to tell you right now, there is not a single team in the Sun Belt that is ready and prepared to take that torch from Texas State and run with it. So if you think about the membership of the Sun Belt, go back 3-4 years ago, 5 years ago, whatever it was. This was a Sun Belt that put 4 total teams in the NCAA tournament. 4 teams from a mid-major conference in the NCAA tournament. An AQ and 3 at-large teams. Well, now you're sitting here, you're talking about those 4 teams that many years ago. You had the Raging Cajuns, South Alabama, Texas State, and Troy. Okay, so Texas State, they're the standard bearer. The Raging Cajuns certainly are not the same program they were even 2-3 years ago. They're still a factor, but they're not the same. Oh, by the way, Troy and South Alabama were in the bottom half of the conference last year. Who was in the top half of the conference, you say? Well, there's a Marshall team who has, who's one of their best players, played 11 games last year and then missed the rest of the season. You have an Appalachian State team in a first-year head coach and with a pitcher who, by the way, transferred from a Division III school and became the ace of a Sun Belt team. Do you know how hard that is to do? And then Sophie Moshos did it. So you have that. You have a Georgia Southern team that's gone through aces like bottles of water. Ainsley Pettit leaves at semester. Oh, well, here comes Maddie Johnson. Maddie Johnson is there for a year, is solid as a freshman, ends up transferring to Georgia. Alana Bernard is still there. She's the standard bearer for their pitching staff, but what do you expect out of a Georgia Southern? It's a conference that's all over the place. And oh, by the way, you've got ULM sitting there that's slowly gotten better and gotten steadier, still has to finish the job. So like it's a conference that's all over the place. And I think that will continue. I think that will continue. The only thing in the Sun Belt that I'm confident of is Texas State's going to be at the top. I believe Coastal Carolina will be right there with them. And remember, Coastal Carolina had a banner year last year, but that's a team that had not won a Sun Belt title since they'd been in the league in 10 years until last year. I think Coastal Carolina will be right there with Texas State at the top. Outside of that, everywhere else, I don't know. I'm the predictor guy. I get that, but I could give you 1,000 predictions, or I could give you 12 predictions, I guess, since there's 12 teams in the conference, and I could give you a reason why each one of them is true. Like I think that's the thing about the Sun Belt. Anything can happen is a nice little phrase. I actually think that's the case in the Sun Belt this year. A team could finish 2nd or 10th just as equally. It's just as likely 10th, 2, 3, 11, just as likely.
The identity of the league has changed. You mentioned that heyday of the multi-bid leagues they were in. It was a pitchers conference, right? Olivia Lackey, Sam Landry, Jessica Mullins. They were all together at the same time, right? Johnson over at Troy. Whereas I think now the league is, I would argue, look at the position players, Justin. I think there's a lot of talent. Ayanna Coleman from Texas State, I think could end up being the best position player mid-major by the end of the year. I think she has a case. You got the combo, the in Coastal Carolina, Delaney Keith, Georgia Hood, who is an tremendous talent there. You got McLean over at App State. You got Brown, the infielder at Monroe. Just talk about some of the position players. I think it's a very sneaky, good, talented depth from a position standpoint, from an offensive standpoint. Leslie from Marshall's another kid to watch there. Everybody seems to have a bat or two that's pretty exciting here, and it showed in our top 100 rankings.
And that's why I think it's so interesting that why the conference is so interesting, but why anything can happen is because if you go around the league, yeah, I could give you a player or two, primarily offensive players. I think the pitching is going to be what vaults somebody ahead this year, just full disclosure. But yeah, I mean, if you go around, you've got an Ayanna Coleman at Texas State. You've got a Morgan Brown and Megan Brown and Brooklyn Lippert at ULM. You've got, even at Marshall, like you've got a Diamond Leslie, but oh, by the way, Bella Gerlach is back, and she was their second leading hitter, hit a dozen home runs or something 2 years ago. You look at South Alabama, who missed the conference tournament last year, and they've still got Olivia Brandstetter over there at third, who honestly is living up to expectations. Like, she's a solid player for South Al. And that's a team that didn't make the tournament. And I'm sitting here giving you a solid offensive player who's one of the best offensive players in the league for them. You go to Troy, and there's McKinnon Howard and some transfers who probably can join her in the ranks among their best. And there's so many players at so many different. You mentioned Michaela McLean at Appalachian State. I can't forget her. You go to Coastal. Hood, Keith, Kaylin Cash, the transfer. Even if you want to get down into the McKenna Metzgers and the Bree Normandens, there's a lot of talent around the conference, but it's so spread out that to me, all it does is buoy the anything can happen. Like, you could tell me that Michaela McLean had an All-American year at Appalachian State, and App State vaulted because of it, and I'd completely be on board. Makes total sense because she's that good of a player. You could also tell me that ULM has 2 or 3 offensive players over here, and their offense was the crowning unit in the conference. They led the conference last year in offense, by the way. But you could tell me that they were the running away studs. Okay, got it. At the same time, you could sit there and tell me because somebody's pitching over here, their offense wasn't a factor. And I'd be like, okay, because the pitching is wide open in the conference. So there's so much talent in the conference, but it's so widespread. I think all it does is it buoys the unknown. It makes conference play very, very important. I'll say that. But I think it buoys the anything can happen in the wacky Sun Belt.
Yeah, which is why I think the gap's not that big. I mean, it came down to the last weekend last year. And then look at what we ended up in the championship game. Coastal and JMU, that finished near the bottom of the conference in the regular season. JMU was a team you and I were high on last year at this time in the preseason show. Did not look good for the first half of the year, but they found themselves in the second half of the year and was literally outs away from winning the conference tournament. They do return Peyton Liss, the two-way player, for them. They got Fleet back. I think JMU will be in the mix if they just got to get off to better starts. We'll see about that on them. And then you mentioned Monroe and App State. I think there's the two teams I'm intrigued by. App State, Whitney Jones's first year, I think perhaps surpassed people's expectations there. They were competitive. I think they finished above 500 or at least middle of 500 in the conference. And Molly Fickner's built that Monroe program for a while. They were a weekend away from winning that regular season title. I'm curious where those two teams are this year, because if those two programs continue a forward up trajectory, that could be two hot names that be in the coaching circles, with Fickner and her obviously tied into the Patrick Murphy tree. Whitney Jones with her tree to Heather Tarr and Cindy Bowman. As you know as well as anybody, in the coaching carousel, sometimes it's not just only how good of a job you do as a coach, but who are your mentors sometimes that people are attracted to. We see this in all the sports, but I think those are two that I'm intrigued by. What's your thoughts on Monroe and those two teams in particular? I know you've spoken to Molly Fickner. I spoke to Whitney Jones. I think those are two teams I'm intrigued by to see if they can contend with a Coastal Carolina, with a Texas State.
ULM, I think they're knocking on the door, but they've got to show me that they're true contenders. Like, coming down to the wire last year, they were top of the conference going into the last weekend, and then just gave it up to Texas State on their home field in Monroe. I think the thing to me is I think the talent level has built to the point where ULM is a contender, but now I need them to prove to me that they actually are. Like when I look at the talent level, when I look at ULM on paper, I see it. I see the recipe. I see the talent level. The transfer pitchers that they brought in, I think Skylar Wagoner from Jacksonville could be a game changer for their pitching staff, but I need to see them deliver. I need them to prove to me that they're a contender. If they do that, if they win some tough series, win some, big moments, step up, don't back down even. Forget stepping up, just don't back down sometimes. That's all I need to see. And I'm in. I'm sold on ULM because I think the talent is there. I think the build is there. The recipe is there. Now I need to see you mix the ingredients together and give me the full chocolate cake. Um, Appalachian State, I'm a little more hesitant on because I think Appalachian State is in that they could be a one-year wonder from last year. Michaela McLean is a solid player, but I've only seen Appalachian State one time, 1 year. I don't know. You do the same thing this year. You continue.
Right. They won't be They won't be sneaking on people this year.
They won't be sneaking up on anybody this year. And the thing is, too, and this is not a shot at anybody, but it is something that in 15 years has proved itself time and time again. No matter how different one coach to another coach is, a coaching change can inspire better results. So it's not a shot at an old coach or a new coach anywhere, but in a team that succeeds in the first year doesn't really prove anything to me. When you succeed in the second year, that's when I see the proof in the pudding, because that's people continuing to respond to whether it's a style thing, whether it's a messaging thing, whatever it is. Year two to me is the first true sign of, okay, this is the new coach coming in and immediately making an impact. Year one can be an indicator, and I think we've seen that indicator at Appalachian State because they defied all expectations last year. To me, though, I had them on a different plane than a ULM type, just because ULM, for sure, last year's first time they're top of the conference entering the last weekend. But they've been building. That's a several-year project for Fichtner. Whitney Jones this is still just year two. This is year two for her staff. This is year two for that roster. They're one that I'm not sold on yet, but if they put together results similar to what they did last year, that's what I need to see. So ULM, I just need to see those little things. I need to see them finish. I need to see them show up in the big games. I need to see them not.
Well, in fairness to Monroe, they haven't been in that position until last year. So maybe they had to go through that experience. Maybe that helps them now this year.
That's why I think that's the one piece that's still there for them. Appalachian State has more pieces for me to buy into their puzzle.
Yes.
That's the difference between the two.
Morgan Zirkle, year two at Marshall. Favorable conference schedule last year helped them in the regular season standings. Do they have the pitching? I think will be interesting as I talk to her about that. Leslie, they have the offense. I think they're going to score runs as long as Zirkle is there. I think the pitching is going to be the question there. I'd be remiss. Here we are. We've talked this lengthy about the Sun Belt and the team we haven't brought up, the Raging Cajuns. They will be the host of the Sun Belt Championships, year two under Allison Habits. She dealt with some injuries, obviously a completely new roster last year. What's your thoughts? We both talked to her. She's optimistic, but where are we with the Cajuns here in year two of the Habits era?
Okay, Cajun fans, you might want to cover your ears because I'm not sold. I think Allie Habits is a solid softball coach. And I think I continue to believe she was the best hire for where that Cajun program was and where it needed to avoid being. If you brought in somebody who didn't understand the Raging Cajun history and their way, that program would not be would be in a very, very bad spot right now. So I still think Allie Habits was the best hire, and I think Allie Habits is a solid softball coach. The part that Cajun fans are going to want to cover their ears about is I think you're just talking about a Raging Cajuns team that's another Sun Belt squad at this point. There's nothing special about the Cajuns anymore in the sense of they used to be the Oklahoma of the Sun Belt. There were teams in the Sun Belt that would look at the Cajuns and see the uniform and know that they were playing in Lafayette in front of that fan base, and that alone was, 2 runs in the Cajuns' favor, so to speak. That doesn't exist anymore. The fan base is still there, to be fair, and in Lafayette is still a tough place to play. But the fear that the Cajun jersey invokes on other teams in the conference largely is not there anymore. That's the one piece that has gone away. And it's not Allie Habits who's taking it away by any stretch. And again, Cajun fans, you might want to cover your ears. It's not Jerry Glasgow who took it away either. That whole coaching change, talent exodus, influx, whatever you want to call it, whatever word you want to put on it, that's not what did it either. It's a progressive thing with where college athletics is right now and where college softball is. That's just how it is. So that said, I do think the Cajuns are a contender. I think they have a shot at winning a conference championship. I just told you there's 10, 11 teams that I think have a chance at winning a conference championship. I think the Cajuns are in the top half of that group. But it's not for any reason other than I do think the conference is very spread out. The talent level is spread out. And I think Allie Habbott's the one thing she does have that maybe one or two others in the conference have besides her. She does know how to communicate to her players what a big moment feels like. There's only a couple of coaches in the conference who've been there, even with teams who haven't. And somebody who's been at the biggest stage, I mean, Allie Habbott has a World Series championship ring. She's been there. You can't recreate that. You can't tell someone about it and them feel it. But Allie Habbott is one of the few coaches in the Sun Belt who can communicate that because she's lived it. So you can get as close to feeling it as possible because she has. I think the Cajuns are a team that are worth something. I think they've got a good talent pool, and if Lexi Delbury and Sage Hoover are truly healthy,
that's the big thing. That's
the key.
How many innings are we getting out of those two in the front end of that routine?
Correct.
In the pitching staff.
But that's the thing is I think the Cajuns are at a point as a program where I'm sitting here telling you that I think they're a conference contender. They're a top half contender. It's only because of merit and where the rest of the conference lies. The one thing I think the Cajuns don't have is I don't think anybody's running scared from that jersey anymore. And that's not a shot at the Cajuns. That's not a shot at the program. Not any stretch like that. It's just how it is. And the thing is, too, I don't think that's a bad thing because here's the thing. If Allie Habbott's and the Cajuns win a championship this year, it's going to be because they earned it. It's not going to be because anybody ran scared. It's going to be because they got in the trenches and grinded to wins and won when the chips were down. And to me, that's a better championship anyway.
And they do host the conference championship, so
correct.
That'll help them out a lot there.
And that fan base showing up will help.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. That's why I brought it up. I think that's up the monitor. I would not be shocked if we're on that championship Saturday and we're looking at the Sun Belt Championship game, and if they're in it, we're like, ooh, are they stealing a bid? Are they blocking a bid? Who knows? A lot of deals. Before we move on to the next conference, give me a couple of arms. Azua is the name that everybody's going to bring up. Texas State, she's the heavy favorite for pitcher of the year. Who challenges her?
Yeah, I mean, Azua is the favorite for pitcher of the year. I think List and Fleet at James Madison certainly both can enter that equation. I mentioned earlier, I like Skylar Wagoner, the transfer who came into ULM. I think she's a solid arm, and I think if she does what I believe she's capable of doing at ULM, she could enter that conversation within the first couple of weeks of conference play, to be honest. Coastal Carolina's got a few arms, and I think they'll have somebody emerge, whether that's Abby Henderson, the returner, or maybe Savannah Jones, the transfer from Bucknell. Those are the two that I think are candidates over there, but that's kind of I want to see what they do once the games get going. But either one of them could have a shot at being a contender there for the pitcher of the year. And then I mentioned Barnard at Georgia Southern. Like she's had a 1-2 punch every year of her career so far. She's been part of a 1-2 punch. This year, it's kind of she's the one, and the 1-2 is not as clearly defined. So I'm interested to see how she steps up to that challenge. But if she steps up to that challenge, she could be in that category too.
Should be interesting to see the Sun Belt. We move to Conference USA, which is the 8th strongest conference last year, aided, of course, by Liberty. But Liberty lost a lot of pieces. The great Rachel Roop, they lose their ace. They're young. Justin, this could be as vulnerable as we've seen Dot Richardson's team, quote unquote. I usually quotes. They're still the favorites, but who is the teams that perhaps could take advantage of that in CUSA? Could this be the year that somebody takes down Liberty in the CUSA crown?
No. Like you say vulnerable, and that's not a shot at the rest of Conference USA. Like I don't want the text messages from the people in Conference USA.
You've already made friends in Lafayette, Louisiana, so you're
correct. But like, no, nobody's taken Liberty down because the thing is, it's Liberty. Now, the vulnerabilities of Liberty are: do they lose a game here? Do they lose a game there? Yeah. Are they losing a series? No. Like, I think Liberty is still strong, and the reason I think they're still strong is because Dot Richardson prepares them to be. Here's the thing. Go back 2 years. When Elena Escobar transferred to Liberty from North Alabama, nobody knew she was going to be the ace of a super regional team. Nobody expected her to step into the ace, or nobody expected her to be the ace of a super regional team. They expected her to step into the ace role. Sure, she might have it. Great. She did well against Liberty in the championship game for the Ace Sun. She's got something to her. Nobody thought Escobar was going to lead them to a super, and then look, she did. She was good enough, and she proved it, and Dot Richardson got the best out of her. That's what Liberty does. So yeah, Escobar's graduated now. Roop is graduated now. But you have a starting lineup that returns a good portion of their talent. You've got newcomers, whether that's transfers or freshmen, who can slot right in over here, right in over there. Roop's production is going to be hard to make up for, but as a whole, I don't really think the offense is going to miss much of a beat, to be dead honest. I really don't. The pitching staff might have some growing pains, but if the offense doesn't miss much of a beat, the pitching staff has time and has room to have those growing pains. So no, it's still Liberty's conference to lose, and I don't think they're going to lose it. Like I mentioned it earlier when we were talking about mid-majors who could go to the supers. Liberty is still in that top tier for me, not because they have an All-American in right field, not because they have an established ace, because they don't have either one of those things. They're on that top tier for me because that is a Liberty team that knows how to win. Better than maybe any other team outside the Power Four, and plenty of teams in the Power Four. That team knows how to win.
I agree with you, especially in the regular season, perhaps, because it's a long route. I will play, though, the devil's advocate. They did drop some games during the conference regular season. It wasn't like they steamrolled through everybody. And even in the conference tournament, Justin, they got beat up by Jacksonville State and was on the brink of elimination. They got to the championship game and then got revenge on Jacksonville State. It was a single-game championship game. That's a whole thing about the format with this USA tournament. But so it wasn't like they were invincible last year. I have a Jacksonville State team that returns 15 from last year, including maybe the best position player going in, and Emma Elrod. You got La Tech, Allie Floyd. I know you believe could be the best pitcher in Conference USA this year, which we don't know who that is for Liberty. I know Yoder is the name that's coming. Maybe he's the odds-on favorite there at Liberty, and they certainly have other younger arms. And then you got Western Kentucky, Amy Tudor. Nobody ever talks about him. Next thing you know, they're like, wait, they finished second in the league? Like, how did that happen, right? So just talk about some of the rest of the league there, because Jacksonville State was a team that knocked off on Auburn last year in Huntsville, has some nice wins and returns a lot. And I think in talking to Coach Bolin there, I think they gathered a lot of information and experience and confidence on the success of last year that they're hoping to carry over to this year.
Because Liberty's conference to lose doesn't diminish the rest of the conference. It's certainly not the rest of the top half. Like, yes, it's Liberty's conference to lose, but you're right. There is talent, and there are good teams below Liberty in the standings. There's good talent there. I think the thing you mentioned, Liberty did drop some games in the regular season. Liberty actually dropped some games to some subpar teams in the conference, if we're going to be honest, record-wise, wins and losses-wise. The thing for me, though, is Liberty drops games here and there, doesn't lose any strength because of it. Like that's the one extra piece of that. They drop games here and there. Now, granted, if Conference USA didn't have a winner-take-all championship game, would I have paid pay-per-view money to watch a winner-take-all Liberty Jack State final? Yes, I would have. But no, like, just because Liberty is the juggernaut, yes, Jacksonville State, Louisiana Tech, Western Kentucky, those teams are really solid. I think the thing for me, I like Jacksonville State. You mentioned Elrod. To me, Elrod is coming into the season is the front runner for Player of the Year. I think she's really good. And I think it's not quite the as she goes, so goes Jack State, but she is a key cog in their wheel. Louisiana Tech, you mentioned Allie Floyd in the circle. You throw Reagan Marchant, the old South Carolina transfer, as the cornerstone of their offense. What was it, 18, 19 home runs last year? And the thing about Louisiana Tech is they have some key positions where they graduated starters. Left side of the infield, center field. They need new people to step into that, whether new people to step up that did not play last year or just people who were in other roles stepping into those roles. And then a Western Kentucky team that actually brings back most of what they had last year. And they're steady. They're steady as you go. They pretty much are always steady as you go. And so I don't want me saying Liberty's going to win the conference to diminish those other teams, because those other teams, they're solid. They're solid. Now, I need to see, some non-conference, get a couple of big wins here and there. Yes, but the thing is, in my mind, I think it's more likely that Conference USA has a shot at a second bid than Liberty just runs away with it. Because I do think 2, 3, and 4, those three teams for me are solid contenders. So just because, yes, I think Liberty wins the conference. Like, I'm going to just say it outright. Apologies to the residents of, Jacksonville State, Louisiana Tech, and Western Kentucky.
Bold. Way to go to bold, baby. Way to be bold.
Right. I'm going out on a limb here. It's a very thin limb. It's been snowy and icy here, so, it's treacherous. But no, I think the strength of 2, 3, and 4, in whatever order, Jacksonville State, La Tech, Western Kentucky, has the potential to build Conference USA into a contender for a multi-bid league more than I think somebody's just going to be knocking off Liberty. Like, I think that's the thing for me, is Conference USA is closer to having a recipe to be a multi-bid league in my mind than they are, okay, somebody just overtakes Liberty and is the new standard in Conference USA because Liberty, has holes to fill. To me, they're closer to multi-bid than they are just somebody taking Liberty's perch.
Delaware is a new member this year. They will be the host of the CUSA tournament because, sure, why not? Whatever. Sure. Let's just get welcome aboard. A lot of conference tournaments in the north in that region, by the way, which go figure. This year, how do you see Delaware fitting into CUSA under with head coach Jen Steele?
I mean, I think they're a contender, but I think it's always hard when you make that adjustment, and I think geography is going to play into that too. There's some trips in their future that I'm curious to see how they respond to. You had lengthy geographical trips in the CAA, so that's not completely new. But truth be told, Conference USA's got a better top half. They've got stronger teams. And some of the trips are longer. Like, there are longer trips than what Delaware's used to making. So I think there's a little bit of an adjustment that'll happen, but I think Delaware's a contender. Like, to me, if you were going to expand, I just said the top tiers, those 4 teams, if you were going to expand to a 5th, I think for me it would be Delaware. Like, I think they're in position to win some games, win some series, maybe knock off a team or two in that top tier, but I also think there's going to be an adjustment.
Got one of the best players you like a lot, too.
Sydney Schaefer, Player of the Year in the CAA. It's always interesting to me, with realignment as prevalent as it is right now, for a player to win Player of the Year in one conference and then see where they fall in another conference. They could be Player of the Year there too. They could also be a mid-pack talent. I think Schaefer's really solid, don't get me wrong. But that's just something that, as a realignment, especially outside the Power Four the last few years, it's just something that intrigues me. You win Player of the Year. If you stayed in your past conference, you're going to be the name circled in the middle of the lineup. You move to a new conference, you are a name circled in a lineup. And I'm always curious what that looks like. And, I mean, proof will be in the pudding.
We move on to the SoCon, which was the 9th-rated conference in college softball last year. Jumped from 20 in 2024 to 9 last year. That is unheard of. That's hard to do, to make an 11-spot jump. But that's the success of the league. Chattanooga was strong, won the regular season title. Greensboro had a solid team. Mercer was a team that won the state of Georgia. Because they beat literally everybody in the state of Georgia. They got hot, won the conference tournament, got to a regional final in Gainesville. However, Justin, this ain't the same SoCon, is it? Because a lot of departures via graduation, via portal, via coaching. For example, Lindsay Fico is no longer at Mercer. She's at FGCU. Chattanooga's in a rebuild. They lose their ace to Mississippi State. Just where are we with the SoCon here in 2026?
I think it's another conference, as we've said a couple of times already, that is a little topsy-turvy. I think the thing about the SoCon, though, is they do have a UNC Greensboro that is a steady Eddie, probably the favorite going into the year. Biggest thing there, you lose one of your most reliable pitchers, and you lose probably your biggest power bat. So you have Greensboro to kind of carry the mantle a little bit. You have 2 up-and-comers in Samford and Wofford. Samford has Olivia Shaw to lead their offense, got a couple of JUCO players that I think I don't really highlight JUCO players a lot, but I really think they fit the Samford mold, could be difference makers there, especially in the circle. And then Wofford's got Margaret Axelson to lead their pitching staff and their team as a whole. And oh, by the way, Abby Greenwood's the 1B/number 2 there. She ain't so shabby either. So you've got a 1-2 pitching punch at Wofford. You've got an offense with some key pieces led by Shaw at Sanford. And you've got Greensboro that's a decent little standard bearer, steadily top of the conference, top three in a bad year. So, like, the SoCon's a little topsy-turvy, but I do think their top tier is set. And you're right, Chattanooga's in a rebuilding year. I really wonder what's going to happen there. Like, a bad year for Chat has been, 3-4 in conference. I don't really know what to expect from them because I don't love their pitching staff. I kind of feel bad for Taylor Long, and I hope she has a lot of ice because there's only 3 pitchers in that bullpen.
Right, because Peja Gould, as I mentioned, transferred to Mississippi State.
So, like, and the thing is, and you can say it's based on the current state of college athletics or whatever else, but Chattanooga wasn't prepared. You had the 2-time pitcher of the year, and you somehow weren't prepared for her to leave. So that's a whole nother thing, but I really question what's going to happen at Chat. I could see this being a major rebuild, to be honest. They did lose some offensive players to graduation as well, so it's not like they returned their whole lineup and then the pitching is the question. Like, the pitching's the question, chunk of the lineup is back, but I could see it being a major rebuild for Chat. Maybe that means they finish 4th. Maybe that means they finish 3rd. Maybe they surprise everybody and Taylor Long is the pitcher of the year. I'm going to tell you right now, if Chat finishes top 2 and Taylor Long's not pitcher of the year, I'll be shocked. Like, if Chattanooga is any kind of a conference contender, you can put Taylor or Long, Taylor on the championship trophy because that will be the reason why they are.
Could this be a year where the champion, like, is it a Sanford? Like, Mercer kind of, I don't want to say came out of nowhere, but they were kind of.
Mercer wasn't the best team in that conference. They got hot at the end.
So could that be the same type of scenario this year?
Sure. I mean, I think that can be the case in a lot of places, though.
How many teams can win that league right now?
I'm going to say 6 because Western Carolina's not just a juggernaut, but they do have enough talent on there that if they made a run in the tournament, I could see it. I mean, you've got a Lily Bell, a Sydney Dirks, you've got 2 or 3 hitters there that are really solid hitters. So there's 6 that if you said, okay, who could make a run in the tournament, I could see it being any one of 6. And there's 8 teams in the conference for those not familiar with the SoCon. So 6 out of 8.
It's going to be interesting if they stay in the top 10 or not as a conference, RPI-wise. That's going to be a challenge. They might take a couple steps back if there.
I think geography helps that too, though, because you do have teams that are in position to play. Like Mercer beats the whole state of Georgia. Western Carolina and UNC Greensboro can play all those teams in the Carolinas. Samford can play Bama and Auburn. So I think that helps too. But I'm with you. Like, that's an interesting spot for what the SoCon is.
Let's go to the ASUN, Atlantic Sun, 10th toughest conference last year. It's a conference, Justin, that quietly, since 2018, at times it's been a multiple bid league, sometimes it's been a 1-bid league. But regardless, they've had at least one of their representatives win an NCAA tournament game since 2018. That's the streak they've had. That continued last year with North Florida, who got to the regional final in Virginia. They begin life without Allison Benning, the greatest player in history of the program, player of the year, pitcher of the year. This is also the last year of the ASUN as we know it with the 2 divisions. There's going to split apart. Half the league is going to the WAC. Half is staying. We don't have time to get into that. That's for next year. Good Lord. Good luck to have fun with that, Justin, explaining that down the road. But in the meantime, what's your thoughts on the ASUN this year? As we know it, the final year, the UNF is the host for the ASUN Championship.
I think it's a wide open conference. I don't like the divisional model. Well, I'm just going to say that. Apologies to the ASUN conference office. I don't like it. I understand the rationale of finances or whatever. I don't think it's beneficial, to be honest. And I don't think it gives you a true indication of where really anybody in the conference is when the teams that are winning the most don't play each other until the championship game. Like, it's just a fundamental thing I have an issue with, especially for 2 years. But that's another story. I think it's a wide open conference. UNF and Allison Benning, standard bearer last year. Benning graduates, but they also lose some pretty key pieces of that lineup too. So it's not, so to me last year, UNF was as Benning goes, UNF goes. That was the easy way to sum up UNF season, even in the postseason. With Benning gone now, it's easy to say, okay, because she's gone, what does it look like? And that's a fair question. They also lost some pretty key lineup pieces. Now, they brought in plenty of players out of the transfer portal. I think Hallie Langford, the Mercer transfer, the former South Florida player, is the best of their class. Like, I think she's got a shot at being really reliable for them. But you're betting on transfers thriving. Sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. But you have to replace so many key pieces. To me, UNF is top tier, but they're just another contender. Because when you go to the West Division, whether it's the gold or the graphite, whichever one they call it amongst their random names, the West Division, for our purposes, I think you've got three teams: Eastern Kentucky, Austin Peay, Central Arkansas, who are on that same tier with North Florida. Those are the four that, if you're combining the conference as a whole, to me are the top tier this year. Biggest reason why is the offense for most of them. Let me put it that way. Austin Peay's offense, categorically. UCA, Central Arkansas, has a couple of offensive performers that I think propel them to being better. So their key pieces are on offense. And then Eastern Kentucky, to me, of what they have returning offense is the standard bearer. I think you're going to have somebody step up in the circle at Eastern Kentucky. But to me, those four teams are the top tier. You have a Florida Gulf Coast with a lot of question marks around it, but with a new head coach, Lindsay Fico, you mentioned, influx of talent. Several players followed her from Mercer. You've got a couple of key returners. They could get to that top tier. But to me, the ASUN's a wide open conference. You could give me any of those top tier teams, those four. You could tell me Florida Gulf Coast. You could give me Stetson or maybe even North Alabama. And again, like I've said several times already, I see the recipe for how they got there. To me, it's a wide open league. And the fact that the divisional model is what it is does not help the conference. Because the thing is, if the schedule had North Florida playing Eastern Kentucky or Austin Peay or UCA, not even all of them, one of them, two of them. If Florida Gulf Coast played Austin Peay in Tennessee, if Central Arkansas traveled down to UNF, then I would actually be able to look at the ASUN and say, okay, this is where the strengths are. Instead, I have one division that's pretty strong. I have one division that's not. And when the tournament comes around, who knows?
Yeah, I think that's why the split wouldn't be the worst thing in the world next after this season that's going to occur. Eastern Kentucky, I mean, they got to replace Rutan. That was the man. It was Rutan Benning. Great matchup last year. Great ASUN championship game. And I think the thing that I think North Florida's roster is probably as talented. They got depth. I know talking to Coach Conrad, he likes his portal class. But there is that intangible. How do those players react now that Allison Benning's not playing there? Because it's easy to say, we'll prove everybody wrong. But what happens when you face adversity and you don't have your superstar player? I've seen it both ways. Some teams rise to the occasion. I've seen some teams like, oh, shoot. We don't know that. And I'm interested to see how North Florida handles that. The one thing that will help them is they no longer have that monkey in their back about winning a conference title. That's been a bugaboo of them up until last year. I have the same questions for Eastern Kentucky in that regard. Austin Peay is simple, pitching. To me, if they had pitching last year, they might have been in the championship game. And I would argue I like Central Arkansas, I think. But again, I have questions pitching. It's a very weird league from a pitching standpoint. Maybe young, I don't know if unproven's the word, but that's kind of what makes this a little complicated.
I think the pitching is the key to the ASUN. Because the thing is, if you sat here and said, who's the best pitcher in the ASUN, A, I would not have an answer for you. And B, if I came up with somebody, it would take me a minute to think through it because it would be based on whether longevity or steadiness at a mid-level, whatever it is. Like, I would have to sit and think about it. Pitching will be the key to the ASUN this year. Does Bailey Runner just make a run at UCA? I think this is her 6th year, all told. She transferred mid-career. Like, is she it? Does Austin Peay find pitching in these transfers they've gotten to complement their offense? Does North Florida have somebody who steps up? Does Eastern Kentucky replace Maddie Rutan well? Does North Alabama's pitching staff finally prove the difference maker to get them into that top tier? Does Florida Gulf Coast combine transfers and returners for pitching to be a strength? Like, every team has questions about their pitching. And to me, the key to the ASUN is going to be whose pitching comes through when the chips are down. Not even in who has the most wins. With the way this divisions are set up, I don't care about wins. You can sweep through conference play and win every game. It's not going to tell me you're the best team in the conference because you don't play no matter what. If you're a team in the West and that team with the side of the conference with the most westernmost teams, yeah, you're going to have beaten somebody good if you go undefeated in conference play, but North Florida and Gulf Coast are still going to be sitting out here. If you're North Florida, you sweep your whole conference, you're going to have the top half of the West that you haven't played. So what do I know about how good you are when you haven't played? So that's where I don't like the divisional model. But I think no matter what, from both sides, pitching is going to be the key to whoever wins the ASUN.
Stetson's always a wild card. Shelly Cousins,
Correct.
you look at them on a piece of paper or a roster, they don't jump out at you. But yet, last year they won 30-plus games. Best year they've had in about 7-8 years. And she's starting to get some of that offensive talent there that she is handling. Their pitching was kind of the question mark last season. They're the type of team that's going to be, how many games, what's their record in 1 or 2 run games? Because really, there was a handful of games they could have easily won. Maybe they have a completely different season. Maybe they're a contender. I think close games is going to be the key for them. Do they find that pitching, scrappy players? That's one to watch there. And I think Florida Gulf Coast, I think you got to give FICO time to build there. I think they will be successful there. I don't know about this year, but I think they might surprise some people there. I still think it's a top 10 league, and I think it's a fun league. And we'll see how that plays itself out. Moving over to the WAC, who will grab some of those ASUN teams next year. This year, the big question, Justin, is they lose Seattle to the West Coast Conference, and they lose Grand Canyon, who's been the face of that program, of the conference, I should say. So who takes the reins now from Grand Canyon as the team in the WAC?
I think it's an open race, but I think Tarleton is the most likely candidate. They were closest last year. They were closest to the mountaintop of the teams that return. And they have Shelby Schultz, sophomore, lefty, solid arm. So anytime you have an arm like that and you were already close to the mountaintop, I think you have to be the favorite. I don't think they're the prohibitive favorite, though. That's the thing. I think they're the favorite, probably should be. I don't think it's a running away race. I actually think that could be a really interesting conference race. You have a Utah Valley that honestly underperformed last year. I think they underperformed their talent level, and I think they underperformed their expectations. Well, this year, because of that underperformance, you come back probably with, at least externally, slightly lowered expectations. So does Utah Valley reverse course and make a run and top those expectations? I think they've got some talent to be able to do it, to be honest. I think there's a potential for that. Look at a UT Arlington or an Abilene Christian. I see holes in the lineup, in the bullpen, whatever it is, at both places. I also see the potential for them to break through and make a run. I think both of those teams have the potential for that. And then I look at a Cal Baptist. I'm not sure what to make of Cal Baptist, to be perfectly honest with you. It could be a Cal Baptist team where the transfers just absolutely show out. It's a first-year coaching staff, and nobody sees them coming, and Cal Baptist makes a run all the way to a conference title. It could also be a Cal Baptist where the transfers come in and do well, but there's an adjustment, and, they're okay, but that's it, and finish mid-pack. I could see several different recipes for a Cal Baptist because there's so many pieces there that have to fit in for their puzzle to end in a championship. That's the thing. I think Tarleton's the favorite. I think they should be, and I think they probably have the best returning player in Shelby Schultz, who they kept. Credit to Tarleton for keeping her, and credit to her for staying. The place like Tarleton, usually a left-hander with 3 years of eligibility left be snatched away in today's world. Going back to a discussion we had earlier, she stayed. They kept her, she stayed. She's a difference maker. So I think Tarleton's the favorite, but there's 4 other teams that there's a recipe. I see the recipe.
I think it's a league that takes a dip this year. They were the 11th strongest conference last year. They don't have Grand Canyon. They don't have a Seattle. I think they dropped back a few spots in the league. Do you agree with that? Yeah,
I think you have to. Because the thing is, when you're looking at the RPI, Grand Canyon did win a lot of games, and they had a few last year where they played a few more top tier opponents than they are this year. So yeah, I think you have to take a step back. I don't think it's going to be necessarily a major step though, because several of these other teams in the conference make a habit. The teams in Texas are going to play Texas Tech and Baylor and A&M and Texas. They're going to still play those big games. So yeah, I think you take a step back. I don't think it's a major step back conference wise.
West Coast Conference, 12th strongest conference last year. Santa Clara is the defending champions. Gina Carbonado and company. They have a core back after making their first regional, winning their first conference title. It's a league that is historically very tight. It's a small league. I'm actually bullish here, Justin. I'm going to give you a bold pick here. I think the West Coast Conference is going to be a top 10 league RPI-wise. I think they will be a top 10 league. I think the SoCon drops out. The West Coast Conference moves up. Jumps into the top 10, and I'll tell you why. I think Santa Clara will still be pretty good. St. Mary's tied with them. I know you talked to their staff over there. They're still being the mix. Loyola Marymount with Coach Flowers. Had a ton of injuries last year, especially in the circle. Gotta think they're due for a healthy year. If they are, I think they could be in the mix there. And then they add Seattle to this conference, Justin, who is a pretty good program. I like their staff. I think they kind of were disappointing down the stretch last year in the WAC. I thought they would be more of a title contender. I know they lose some pieces there, but I just like their coaching staff there. I'm not even going to talk about Oregon State, which is in their last year. They add Jenny Topping to the staff, reuniting with Laura Berg. Of course, they were Olympians together in 04. There's some interesting storylines in the West Coast Conference. I'm going bold here. We'll see how this ages a year from now. I'm going to say top 10 league. Your quick thought of West Coast Conference, anything you want to add to that, or we can move on?
I actually personally like the fact that Santa Clara and St. Mary's did tie for the regular season championship last year, because both of those programs have been building over the last few years, and to see both of them kind of get, because when you win a regular season, only one goes to the NCAA tournament, but I just like the fact that both of them finish at the top of the league, kind of get their flowers a little bit, because Gina Carbonado's done a good job of building the Santa Clara program, rebuilding it, to be honest, and Sonia Garnett's done a good job of building that St. Mary's program and being pretty consistent there now several years into her tenure. That's my thing about the West Coast Conference, is I like the fact that they tied. As crazy as it is for tiebreakers in the conference office, so apologies to the commissioner, but I really like that both teams finished on top, because it's easy to forget a team that's never been there if you're not watching them every day. And on the West Coast, that's especially a thing in a small conference. But I really like that both those teams got their flowers, because they've got some good talent out there. Both of those teams have some good talent on their rosters. And I think you finally got to get your flowers a little bit. No pun intended to the league.
I was going to say, how many times you got a coach named Flowers in the league? I thought you were like, where you going with this? I'm
not that punny, unfortunately.
It does have star power in the coaching circles there. Kalani Ricketts, second year as a pitching coach at Pacific. Year 2 post the Brian Cozy era, of course, Coach Duran over there. So it's an interesting league. Gets lost. It's the last league that's holding out as far as not having a conference tournament. That will change a year from now.
One more year.
One more year. Okay. Just I want to make sure. Another league, because I don't know. I lose track anymore. Another league that could be in that mix to be a top 10 league this year, as far as prediction, is the Big East. UConn finally broke through last year, won the tournament title. They had won the regular season title a bunch of times under Coach Valentino, but it hadn't broken through until last year, winning the tournament. The irony of that is they didn't win the regular season title last year. That went to St. John's, who arguably had the two best arms in the league, and returned those two arms this year. You've got Creighton, who has played under Krista Wood the last 2 years in the Big East Championship game. The last 2 years, they've been knocking on the door. And then you got Villanova, who's been a standard there since Coach Orchard's arrival a couple years ago. They made the regional final in Fayetteville. Your thoughts on the Big East?
To me, with credit to Creighton and Villanova, like, the matchup that I can't wait to see once again is St. John's pitching versus UConn's offense. Like, I get that Grace Jenkins transferred. She was the player of the year last year. But to me, UConn still has heavy hitters. You've got Kat Petty's. You've got Caitlin Breslin. St. John's returns both of their top pitchers. That's the matchup to me that I can't wait to see. That said, you have to throw Creighton in there because they've been knocking on the door. And if you think about it, it's a similar recipe to what Krista Wood was doing at South Dakota State before South Dakota State broke through and became the juggernaut in the Summit League for several years under her guidance. It's a pretty similar recipe now at Creighton. So you have to throw them in there because Krista Wood has written that recipe, and she's just gone back to it in rebuilding and building up the Creighton program. I like the top half of the Big East. I think the matchups between those teams in conference play are going to be the key. Like if you take the top 4 teams in the Big East and say in some order it's St. John's, UConn, Creighton, Villanova. To me, the key to whoever wins the Big East is going to be playing the other 3 of those teams. And if somebody sneaks up from the bottom, to me, it's going to be because they did well against those 4 teams. Like those top 4 in the Big East, to me, who performs best against the others or who sneaks up on those 4, to me, is the key to who's going to win the Big East in full.
Should be fun. Serafinko and Francois back there at St. John's. DePolo's got a good. Do they have enough bats? I know they got to rebuild some of the infield. Creighton, they lose Potter, but they're going to be right in the mix too. I think Big East will be fun too. They could be a team in the mix there, the top 10 of the Big East Conference there. Summit, Omaha. Give me a name not named Madia Groff. That's a key to Omaha, and for that matter, I think the team that I think of that maybe could flirt with competing with Omaha is a team that's actually eligible this year. St. Thomas, who actually played pretty well last year. They weren't eligible for the conference because of their changing there. But I think that could be the team if you're looking, hey, it's not like Omaha's been a unanimous winner. In fact, Omaha at times has struggled to win the regular season title over this period of time. But your thoughts on the Summit?
I mean, that's another one of my favorite stats. Omaha hasn't won the conference regular season. I think I mentioned that earlier. They didn't win it the first 2 years, and then last year shared it with St. Thomas. Obviously got the 1 seed in the conference tournament because St. Thomas wasn't eligible for the conference tournament, but then they run roughshod through the conference tournament and then win games in the NCAA tournament. It's a really interesting I don't want to call it a setup even. It's just a really interesting chain of events because as good as Omaha is during the regular season, no matter the opponent, and in the postseason, it's just in conference play. It's just a matter of a couple of games. One of those regular seasons was on winning percentage too, to be fair, but still didn't get it. So it's just an interesting thing because we think of Omaha as one of the juggernauts. I listed them earlier as one of the 6 teams that I think has a shot at a super, but they haven't won a regular season, at least not all on their own. I think Omaha is still the favorite. I think they should be. Maddie Groff is a stud. She's as good as advertised, maybe better, even now 2 different schools and 2 different conferences. Her sister, Rylan, behind the play, I mean, she was Omaha's leading hitter last year. The addition of Taylor Sedlacek, I think, helps immediately fill the void left by the 2 starters that did graduate. The rest of the lineup is back, so there's a lot of continuity. It's a veteran team. Groff's the leader. Pitching staff is solid. A lot of returners, a lot of continuity there. I like South Dakota State and St. Thomas as the ones who could challenge Omaha. Like South Dakota State did win those 2 regular season titles 2 years ago and 3 years ago. They've stayed at the top of the league, toward the top of the league, played for the championship in the tournament a couple of times. So like South Dakota State's not been far off. They just haven't been able to get back to the NCAA since Omaha started this run. And then you mentioned St. Thomas. They were really good last year. They've got some real talent up there. And it's talent that, to me, and I don't think this can be understated, it's talent that has translated. You got to remember, that's a St. Thomas team that moved up from Division III to Division I and largely hasn't missed much of a beat. They've pulled off a Power 5 upset here and there. They share the conference title last year in the Summit. That's a St. Thomas team that should, on paper, have had, we got to adjust this, got to do that. They've contended right away, and now they've got championship rings from last year, even without making the conference tournament because of the eligibility and the realignment thing. They've still got championship rings to prove the adjustment's done. They're here to contend. They're here to play.
Moving on now to the Ivy League, which, believe it or not, was the 15th strongest conference. Princeton has dominated the regular season championship. They won the last 4 years. 2 years ago, remember, they eliminated Ole Miss in the Lafayette Regional there. Lisa Van Akron, I would say, would be one of the hot names in the coaching carousel, except she's one that generally likes it there at Princeton. She's from Lehigh, they're a great player in her own right, but she has built a tremendous program at Princeton. They got a lot of players back, including Zhang and Karis Ford. They're on a top 100 D1 softball player. They're, to me, the favorites. They were upset last year in the tournament by Brown. Credit to Coach Kelch and the job she did there, but they lost some of their big pieces there at Brown. They're a bit of a rebuild. I know there's a team you like perhaps that could challenge Princeton is Harvard.
I mean, I think Princeton and Harvard are the two, to me, are the most consistent standard bearers in the Ivy the last several years. You mentioned Princeton and Van Akron and how steady they've been. I mean, 4 years in a row hosting the conference tournament. Like, just when you think about it, even though they've only won a couple of the tournaments, like just when you look at it and think about the fact that for 4 years the conference tournament's been on their home field because that makes them the standard bearer, if we're going to be honest. Harvard is who I think probably is next in line with Princeton, closest to Princeton. Don't look past some of the talent at Columbia and Dartmouth especially. Yale was solid a couple years ago, a little bit of a backtrack last year, but I like Harvard as probably the closest challenger to Princeton. Throw in a Columbia and Dartmouth just from a contention standpoint. I think Brown probably rebuilds a little bit. I mean, they made a run at the end, don't get me wrong. But I think, you lose the pitcher of the year, you lose your 2 best players, like you got to rebuild a little bit after graduation there. But to me, Harvard's the closest contender.
Princeton's a team I don't want to see in a bracket in a regional. I think they're a dangerous 4 seed for someone. So we'll see how that plays itself out. A conference you got to know very well, Justin, the Big South. You spoke to every coach in the Big South recently. What's the word on the Big South?
Well, I mean, it's small. Obviously, we know that 7 teams, but I actually like the way the Big South has shaken out the last few years. You got to think USC Upstate conference realignment gets to the Big South, was making the NCAA tournament annually, gets to the Big South, takes them a minute to get back to the tournament. Now they did in 24 and then make it again in 25. Longwood, top of the conference, 3-4 years running, either tied for first or finishing solo second, haven't been able to get to the NCAA tournament at all. Radford, first-year head coach last year, freshman pitcher in Dakota Redmond, they go and win the conference regular season, just casually. And oh, by the way, Winthrop's played for the conference championship 2 years in a row. So it's a 7-team league where more than half of the conference has been at the door to knock on a championship, whether regular season or tournament. That's not everyday fare for a conference that small. I think the regular players are going to be at the top, or at least going into the year. Dakota Redmond, now a sophomore at Radford, she's the premier talent, even in her second year in the Big South. She's so solid in the circle. I really liked what I saw from her last year. She was cool in big moments. If she's at Radford for 4 years, she'll be a Hall of Famer, yes, but like Radford, she's a stud. She's a really solid arm. Upstate, Sophia Kardatsky was their freshman stud last year. Had a little bit of an injury thing in the offseason. She'll be back sometime mid-season is the plan as of now. She'll concentrate on her offense when she is. So that changes things a little bit because Upstate also lost Sierra Manis, transferred to Clemson. So now you have Kardatsky, who wasn't just a blow-you-away pitcher, but she was solid. You lose Manis, who had a lot of innings. So Maddie Dreerup is the lead returner in the circle. That, to me, is the biggest question for Upstate. And then outside of that, you have a Longwood who, like I said earlier, has always been right there. Like they tied for the conference championship 2 years in a row and then finished solo second each of the last 2 years. So they're right there. So to me, I question how big is that. I think the word you used earlier, the very scientific term, was that bugaboo of that needing to be the one step you haven't taken. Just finishing the job in the tournament. You finish second in the regular season, make the jump, finish first, make the NCAAs, whatever it is, whatever you want to call it. How big is that monkey on their back? If they're able to contain that pressure, it could be Longwood's year. They don't have any just major super studs in their lineup or in their pitching staff to write home about. What they do have is a lot of consistency. And I think that sometimes that can win all. That can beat all. So I like the way the Big South shapes up. I think you have 3 or 4 teams that have a shot going in. Not even, I've used the word recipe a lot. That's not even what I mean this time. Like I look at it and go, you know what? I might pick them. Oh, but I might pick them. Oh, but I might pick them, because there's teams that are championship caliber 3-4 deep in that conference.
Hope Kardatsky gets healthy in time, because I really think there's potential for a cool Upstate Radford rivalry there. With Redmond and Kardatsky, you got Coach Hawkins, Chris, who is on the D1 softball top 25 all quarter century best mid-major head coaches. Guy wins all the time there, right? And then you got Kevin Fagan. What a unique background. Played college football at the University of Miami. Goes into coaching college softball, the JUCO level. And I think he's a guy, if Radford would make the NCAAs, he could become a hot name in the coaching carousel. So I hope we see that league healthy there, because I think those two, that would be a fun series to see them play and maybe hoist the championship. Dr. Megan Brown, you mentioned Longwood, those should not be discounted, to your point. So you had fun covering the Big South Media Day? That was fun, right?
I mean, I was hoping to be there in person until this little thing called an ice storm kind of came around and messed up those plans. But yes, it was fun. I actually do like the concept of a league like that doing a softball media days. So, shout out to the other commissioners.
In other words, hey, we're open. We're available. We're interested in doing it, folks. It should be fun in the Big South. Big West. Couple quick things here in the Big West. You got Santa Barbara as the champs. Joe Evans wins the tournament. Big for her on that front. Coming after taking some time off, rising that program up. Fullerton won the regular season title, was upset in the tournament. They return a lot in year 2 of Gina Oak's era there as the head coach, including maybe one of the best players there. Long Beach State, Kendall Fern is the new head coach there after Kim Souter retires. Really like her staff. I think Long Beach. The question is the transition. How does that go there? CSUN, who was in the championship game last year. I think Jody Cox is the quote interim coach officially, taking over for Charlotte Morgan, who of course went to Fresno State. Your thoughts here at Big West? Anything I'm missing there, Big West wise?
No, I think the two biggest questions for me in the Big West: one, can Santa Barbara handle being the favorite, being the hunted? That's a position that Fullerton and Long Beach are both very familiar with. Santa Barbara is not. Can they? How do they handle that pressure that comes with being the hunted? And then the other thing for me is how quickly and how well does Long Beach come together? Like that's a completely new look team to a certain degree, new coaching staff, a lot of new faces. Those to me are the two biggest questions with the Big West, because Fullerton is steady as you come. Fullerton is Fullerton. Coaching change, changes on staff. You bring back familiar faces, like even talent on the field. Like it's steady as you come. So I don't really have any questions about Fullerton because I know they're going to be there. To me, the biggest questions are how does Santa Barbara handle the pressure of being the favorite, the hunted, and how quickly does Long Beach come together?
And Fullerton is the host once again for the Big West tournament there. So watch out for there. And they got one of the best players. We have it ranked in the top 100.
Of ours.
That's a name to watch and remember in the Big West. MAAC. How about Mandy Colgate? First year, Miami of Ohio. We think, it's going to be a rebuild. Nah, just win a conference championship. So good start for her over there in Miami. Your thoughts on the MAAC, year two for her? I know there's some other storylines you're intrigued in the MAAC.
I mean, Miami should be the favorite going in again. I think the thing for me about the MAAC, we've said it about a couple of other conferences. In the MAAC, I see a widespread talent pool to a degree. There's this player over here at this school, this player over there at that school. It's interesting to me who's gonna come in with the most consistency throughout their lineup, throughout their pitching staff, and that to me is going to be the secret to the MAAC this year. There's a lot of teams in there that I think are probably close that could get to that point. There's also a lot of teams that, if that one star player doesn't carry the load, what happens? And I think Miami even is in that category. I like Miami's transfer class, but they do have a sizable, a large transfer class. How does that transfer class stack up? I look at an Ella Whitney at Ball State, Skip Miller at Ohio. Ella Whitney playing both sides of the ball. But Michaela Timmons is not there anymore to take some of the offensive pressure off. So does Whitney suddenly become the centerpiece of the lineup? How does that play in? Skip Miller at Ohio, reigning pitcher of the year in the conference. Anna Wise left, so it's Miller and Levering now probably to be the number two. What does that dynamic look like? How much of a load does Miller need to shoulder? So some things like that I think are going to be the keys to the MAAC. Miami's the favorite. They should be. But there's also several teams that, especially with the way the conference schedules, that I'm like, okay, what does this look like? And I'm not going to lie, there's a couple of teams like a Toledo. Like, think about this. Toledo, first of all, Toledo I thought was better last year than their record showed. But Toledo opens their season down in Tempe. They play Arizona State. Everybody's like, oh, Arizona State and Oklahoma. Well, Toledo's down there playing Arizona State to open the season before that game. Like, what better way to start than, the opening act ahead of an Oklahoma showdown on the desert? Like, so I think the MAAC's interesting, but I think who comes up with the most consistency in the lineup, consistency in the pitching staff, that's going to be the key.
Moving over to the Southland, I mentioned earlier in the pod, there was another team I thought could make a noise and make a super regional. That's this in this league right here. Southeast Louisiana, Rick Freeman and company, quietly, I don't know if people are aware of this, back-to-back regional finals appearances for them. They made the regional finals in Tuscaloosa 2 years ago, made the regional final last year in Baton Rouge, obviously a lot of noise, eliminating LSU, beating them twice. They've got a core back from that team, Justin, with Freeman. You'll see them up close in Clearwater opening weekend, part of their challenging non-conference schedule. I would include them as a team that would not shock me. I know that in talking to Coach Freeman back in the fall, that's their goal, is to get past that regional. They've been knocking on the door, and who knows, that could be a team that could be in a super region. Would not surprise me.
Easter does really well of showing up in the biggest moments. Lights are bright as they shine. Like that's kind of been a thing the last few years, even during the regular season in a few games. Like you think about it, they were in that tournament last year or 2 years ago over at Florida State and played FSU tight. Played them tight. And that the lights were bright, sure, but that wasn't the postseason. That was the regular season. They still did it. It actually makes me very intrigued to see Southeastern in that season opening tournament in Clearwater, just because that's going to be new territory for them. But the opponents are going to be that level of brightness. The lights are going to be that bright, and I'm curious what's going to happen for Southeastern. Thing for me with Southeastern is you brought back a couple of players who are familiar with the system. We're going to finish their careers in Division II because that's where their eligibility was. But with the Pavia rule, they have their JUCO year that they can spend, but have to spend it at D1. So now they're back. So Sarah Blanchard is back, and Kaylin Watson is back. So the makeup of that Southeastern roster this year is really interesting to me. But the one thing that also is interesting to me about the Southland as a whole, outside of some events that happened at the conference tournament last year, Southeastern would not have even been in the NCAA tournament. So as good as they've been, as steady Eddie as they've come, and as solid as they were last postseason, they were almost not even there. It was almost McNeese, who also, by the way, won the conference regular season last year. So as much credit as we give Southeastern for their talent level, for their steadiness, for showing up when the lights are bright, that's also at Southland, where Southeastern didn't even win the conference last year. McNeese did. Outside of a couple of things in the conference tournament, McNeese would have been in the NCAA tournament. So I think that's what's interesting to me about the Southland is those two teams are always and forever jockeying for position. I mean, even with the pod system of the conference tournament, the 2-week conference tournament in the Southland, those are the hosts. Generally, those are expected to be the two hosts. It's almost like, hey, Southland, you can start your RVs and your trailers going to one of these two spots to get stuff set up, because that's just the expectation. That's, to me, is the fun part of the Southland, especially McNeese and Southeastern. They've been rivals for how long? Same state, geographically not that far apart. So, that adds to it. But that, to me, is the fun part of the Southland. As talented as we give credit for Southeastern being, as talented as I think they still are, you also have a McNeese team over here that won the conference regular season last year.
That makes it difficult to degree.
Punch.
Right, it's not going to be a multi-bid league. It just isn't. I mean, they're the 19th rated conference last year. McNeese has quietly done a nice job bouncing back. Remember, a couple years ago, they were 3 outs away in Seattle from winning that regional against Washington. Collapsed. Just a crushing loss. That honestly, I was wondering, would it set the program back years? They've quietly bounced back, to your point, won the regular season title. Had a dramatic Game 3 against Southeast Louisiana. That's a sneaky good rivalry there with James Landreneau and Rick Freeman there in company in the Southland there. So
they've got Corinne Poncho back, too. Took off last year, back in the lineup. That's a big bat for McNeese. Any
non-McNeese Southeast Louisiana note you want to mention, or we move on?
I mean, Victoria Altamirano, 2 Player of the Year in a row at Incarnate Word, and she's stuck. Again, it's one of those things. Credit to her for staying. Credit to Incarnate Word for keeping her. She's been the standard bearer Player of the Year-wise in the Southland 2 years running now. And she doesn't play for either one of those teams.
No doubt. It's kind of wild. Good for her. Salute to her. Missouri Valley, 20th best conference. It's not as good as it used to be, that's for sure. However, top heavy with Belmont, Maya Johnson, the number 1 ranked player in the D1 softball players rankings, of course, the All-American pitcher, back for Belmont, for Laura Matthews, who's done a great job building that Belmont program. You also, though, got Southern Illinois, Jen Silver. Remember, they won the regular season title. They got to replace pitching, but they got an offense that certainly is going to carry them there with Emily Williams. They've added Potter from Creighton. It's a big bat. And then Northern Iowa always seems to be in the mix there with Coach Jacobs and company. Your thoughts there on the Valley?
You're right. It's top heavy. I think the thing about SIU, I have questions about their pitching. I do, just because you got to replace Mackenzie Newcomb, and probably the most likely candidates to replace her production are underclassmen, maybe even freshmen. So to me, that's a little bit of okay, how's that going to go? It's always okay, how's that going to go? Belmont, you do have Maya Johnson. I like the depth that they have in the circle behind her. You add Hannah Lear from Campbell. So got some experience there, been solid, got a couple of veteran returners. So I like the depth behind Maya in the circle for Belmont. And that offense, like Laura Matthews has said, that offense has added some power this year. Even some returners have gotten stronger and added some power. That was kind of the thing last year in a few games, little more power, a little more pop. Maybe a game goes a little bit of a different direction. Maybe the pitching gets a little better of a backing. So I like that aspect of Belmont, what they've added and how they've kind of filled out that roster. And then you're right, Northern Iowa's always right there. They're one of those teams that even in bad years, like a bad year is what, a 4th place finish? Like that's kind of their floor at this point. And one thing that Ryan Jacobs said to me in our preseason convo that I really found interesting, the pitchers the players even that come through his program that end up with a fifth year, they shine in that fifth year. And Anna Wisnowski is in her fifth year this year. Kaylin Packard, even Sammy Bunch. Like there's a track record of players, Northern Iowa Stars in their fifth year that really show up and show out in that fifth year. And here Wisnowski is in the fifth year. So I think it is a top heavy league. Questions, the easy question about SIU, what's the pitching look like? Easy question about Belmont, how do they handle the pressure of being the hunted now because they kind of burst onto the scene last year? And the easy question about Northern Iowa, can they stay at that level? Can they meet those two? Does Wisnowski, does she shine year 5?
Move on to the A10. 2 new head coaches at GW and St. Bonaventure. GW, of course, Chrissy Schoonmaker goes to Houston, comes over from GW. Something that intrigues me, St. Louis, the defending champions, led by Abby Mallow, catcher, tremendous talent. Dayton, Izzy Kemp, maybe the best pitcher in the league. Could have that'd be a fun one. You want to circle Abby Mallow versus Izzy Kemp if Dayton and St. Louis play. That could be right up there with Charlotte versus FAU when Autumn Courtney faces Jenna Lord. Any other thoughts on the A10?
I mean, I would love to see a home run derby between Abby Mallow and Ashley Corpus from GW. No, I think that's the thing. There's a lot of teams there in the A10 that I could see. Okay, this is how you're going to get there. I think the thing for me, and this is not my sleeper. I'm saying that St. Joe's is going to win, but I want to see how St. Joe's pitching staff shows up. St. Joe's pitching staff's got 7 arms at their disposal. If those 7 arms show up, because I was touting a couple of deep pitching staffs earlier, so everybody knows at this point I like a deep pitching staff. If St. Joe's pitching staff shows up and develops to be as reliably deep as they are personnel deep, that could be a game changer.
Moving on to the next conference, the Big Sky. Idaho State's the regular season champions, led by Ava Brown. No, not the Ava Brown from Florida. This is a different Ava Brown. She's one of the best mid-major players there. But Weber State won the tournament. Kind of a rivalry there with Weber State and Idaho State at the top there in the Big Sky.
Well, and stop me if you've heard this before, but I love Idaho State's pitching staff because it's deep. I feel like I just said that. No, the thing is, like, there are a few pitching staffs around the country among mid-majors where they have 3, 4, 5 arms that I think if they're all reliable, I see a recipe where they're all reliable. And if they are, that's a game changer. Idaho State is another one of those teams. I did not plan to say St. Joe's and then Idaho State back to back. Here we are. I like the depth of the pitching at Idaho State. They really do have really 3 arms that you can write home about right now, and 2 more that I think have real potential to be that by the end of the season. Throw in an offense that loves to hit, that knows how to hit. You mentioned Ava Brown, and then they add Sydney Groves, the transfer from Boise, who honestly should be able to step into at least the power shoes vacated by Gracie Smith. And if you have 2 power hitters and then you go to 2 power hitters, that's a recipe for a lot of power and a lot of scoring. So I love the pitching staff at Idaho State and what their potential is. I like the offense. I think the offense is solid there. Now, we've said it several times. Last year, we had a couple of teams that got over the hump and a couple who still didn't. Idaho State hasn't gotten over the hump to get to the NCAA tournament. That's the monkey on their back. They still have to do that. Like, that's the thing this year. Idaho State's got to get, in my mind, to the tournament because this is their best. This is their best group of talent in my mind. Deepest pitching staff, still a solid offense. Now, outside of that, you have a Weber State that has looked solid, that came through in the tournament, really used their whole roster. I think the number was either 21 out of 22 or 22 out of 23 players on the roster played in the postseason last year for Weber State. Like, they utilized their entire roster. They utilized their versatility, and they did it well. Now, here's where I'm going to go out on a limb, and you're going to call me a little crazy, and I'm okay with that. So I'm not ignoring Northern Colorado. I'm not ignoring Sacramento State. Like, good programs, solid contenders. Watch Montana because they've got a pitcher that I think is really, really solid. Came from Division II Western Washington, solid there, went all the way to the the Elite 8 in Division II, goes to Montana at a point where Steph Ewing is in year 2 of that rebuild up there. I just like the recipe there. So I'm not saying Montana's going to win the conference. I'm not saying Montana's going to contend to win the conference. I'm saying I think Montana's going to be better than people realize, and they are worth watching.
That's interesting. All right, let's move on here. I'm going to pair up a couple conferences here. The CAA, and I'm going to pair up the Horizon because both of these leagues are a little unstable. The CAA, 3 coaching changes in the league. Elon wins its first conference championship in 15 years. Congrats to there. But there's a lot of new coaches in the CAA. The Horizon literally lost softball programs. Cleveland State and Fort Wayne do not exist anymore. That's a big loss. Cleveland State's been a conference title champion in the Horizon and a contender. Robert Morris is the champion there. Clearly, Fort Wayne and Cleveland State, they got to save those precious other sports. They don't get me started on that. Kind of your thoughts on the CAA and Horizon. A little unstable here with these two leagues, in my opinion.
Yeah, little. Yeah, I mean, even when the whole finances thing came around and people talk about, okay, where some softball programs are going to shutter or whatever. I don't know how many people expected 2 programs in the same conference to shutter that close together that quickly. Purdue, Fort Wayne, and Cleveland State were also among the standard bearers in the conference in the last couple of years. So that added to that level of intrigue. I actually like Robert Morris. I think they've got some solid returners coming back. They have some good centerpieces of their offense there. It's definitely a different looking league. You take away Cleveland State, you take away Purdue, Fort Wayne, you scatter the talent that was coming back at those 2 schools. It just looks different. The CAA, I think, is interesting too. So they've also adopted what I call almost a pseudo intradivisional model, in that they have split into divisions, and you're going to largely play teams in your own division, including some teams twice, home and home, but not completely. Because with Delaware leaving, the divisions are unequal. So some in the north will play a couple in the south, some in the south will play one in the north. It's a whole convoluted setup. Point being, similar to what I said about the ASUN earlier, you're not going to get a true indication of who the best teams are in the CAA. You're not. I will say, though, the team that I think could be sneaky in the CAA is UNC Wilmington. So here's the thing. That's a Wilmington team, made the NCAA tournament, what was it, 3-4 years ago, had a coaching change, 2 years into the new coach, makes the NCAA tournament again. This year, I like the returning talent core at Wilmington a lot. You've got Madison Biddle leading the offense. You've got Michaela Huddleston, who I think is criminally underrated as the ace of that pitching staff. So you have proven key leaders at the top of the 2 key units. And you've got a team that knows how to win. They've been there just a couple of years ago. So to me, Wilmington might be the sleeper in the CAA. But again, I think it's going to be a conference where there's so many question marks. There's so much unknown. And with this new divisional thing, I don't think you're going to know who the best team is. You might not know after the tournament if somebody goes on a run.
It's going to be interesting to say the least. On the other hand, the OVC, maybe the most, now finally, maybe some stability in the league. That's been going through some constant changes with realignment over the last couple of years. Am I right on that? That maybe now we finally have some stabilization in the OVC?
I think so. And I think similar to what we said about the Missouri Valley, I think in the Ohio Valley, they are starting to become a little top heavy, honestly. You have a Southeast Missouri team that, and I've used this phrase several times, and for those who are sticking with us this deep into the conferences, hope you've noticed, Steady Eddie. That's SEMO. Right there at the top. First, second, third in a bad year, maybe. Not a lot of player transfers, not a lot of roster turnover. Steady as you come. And they make the tournament. I think they got 3 tournament appearances since 19. So SEMO's the standard. Then you have an Eastern Illinois team that burst onto the scene a few years ago. Tara Archibald did the rebuild, went to the tournament, won a couple of regular seasons, leaves to go coach with her dad at Texas Tech, new coaching staff, and EIU sustains that, makes the NCAA tournament last year. The thing about EIU this year, mass talent exodus. You had a Slansy, the pitcher, who went to Kentucky via transfer. You had Kendall Grover, the third baseman, who went to Florida via transfer. You had Carson Davey, the outfielder, went to Florida Atlantic via transfer. So some of your best players transferred out, but you do have Carly McKenzie, who even as Mackenzie O'Slansy was the headliner, McKenzie sits there and wins the tournament MVP for the OVC tournament last year. And then you have SIU Edwardsville, who to me might be the sleeper in the OVC this year. I really like SIUE. They're young. They've graduated some experience the last couple of years, so I think some people might look past them outside looking in. I really like SIUE this year. I think they've got some pieces. I think they might have the pieces. To me, that in the I thought SIUE was gonna represent the conference in the tournament last year. I thought they were that put together last year. I think the momentum that you get, even from just missing, can play a difference. I think those three teams are the ones to watch, but I think SIUE might be my sleeper.
Patriot League, Boston's the reigning champs. They won it again, back on the top, beat Army. Casey Ricard back. The credentials are there. She's ranked in a top 10 in the D1 Softball 100 list. We brought this up on the live show on Sunday night on In the Circle. I asked the question, should Tegan Kavan be in the same, should be thrown in there with Pickens, Kennedy, and Jordy Fromm? Which, again, I'm going to be recall for that. Check out the live episode to find out the answers, what the guys gave us the answers there. So I'm going to ask you this. Shouldn't Casey Ricard on her resume be thrown in there with Amaya Johnson, with Amadia Groff, with, Autumn Courtney, especially since Ricard's been doing it for a while now?
I think she's got an argument too, yeah. I think she's got an argument. I think the biggest thing there is probably when I think of Ricard, even as good and as steady as she's been, I don't know what I see as the headliner on her resume outside of that steadiness. And don't get me wrong, the steadiness is the most important part. Like, that's absolutely categorically the most important part. But I think that's probably the thing that creates the if maybe question for Ricard. All that said, I absolutely think she's got a case to be top four, big four, whatever you want to call it. And the thing about Boston in general and the Patriot League, well, first of all, Patriot League in general, I can't wait for the Army-Boston rematch. Army returns so much of their lineup. Boston returns so much of their lineup. I can't wait for the rematch. But the thing about Boston in general is they're so steady in general that you almost start to take them for granted. Like, you almost start to look at them and go, okay, well, yeah, but Boston last year, they didn't win the regular season. They had a down year. Well, did they though? If not winning the regular season by virtue of losing one series in conference is a down year, that's a pretty solid place to be. And then they go through and they win the tournament on Army's home field anyway. So I think the thing about the Patriot League for me, Boston is the steady Eddie. Again, apologies to those who've stuck with us this long, who've heard that phrase used 10 times already. Army is the newcomer. I said it earlier when we talked about the Sun Belt. Army, for me, is kind of in that Appalachian State spot. Show me your consistency. Show me it's not just a one-year thing. I don't think it's a one-year thing. I love the talent that Army's returning. That's why I say I can't wait for the Army-Boston rematch yet again. But I want Army to show me. Show me you're not just a one-year wonder.
Agreed. Ashley Waters, certainly we've talked about her many a times. Easily has already been a hot name coaching-wise for Boston. They'll open up in Orlando. Look forward to seeing them in person there. Good times to be a Boston sports fan there with the Patriots and the Celtics and BU.
It's true.
It's true. I'm going to pair these conferences up together. America East, the Metro Atlantic, and the Northeast Conference. America East, Binghamton came out of there, got a 3 seed last year. Jess Bump, another hot name, I think, in the coaching circles there. She's from that area, though, so it's going to be hard to get her out of there. But nonetheless, they return a lot. Heavy favorites. The MAAC, Maris, Joe Asanio, another hot name I would put in the coaching list there. Done a great job at Maris. Dominant team. They got a 3 seed in College Station. They got some pieces to replace, though. And then the Northeast Conference is wild. St. Francis, they lose Beth Krysak as she went to Boston College. St. Francis going to be this year, last year, D1, I think, before they get dropped down to D3, so they lost a ton. Long Island has a new head coach, Rick Calvert. What? Yeah, that happened. Take it wherever you want, Justin, with those 3 leagues.
I guess you just want me to talk about the state of New York for a minute, because
pretty much that's you saw. You caught what I said. You caught what I did there.
I did. No, I think all 3 conferences do revolve around the state of New York. To be honest, to me, Binghamton is far and away the torchbearer for the America East at this point. They return so many key pieces. I liked what they were made of last year. I thought they had good showings in non-conference play, and they scheduled tough again this year, so they have a chance to make some noise in non-conference play yet again. Binghamton's the standard bearer in the America East. Who's their closest competition? Great question. Bryant, lost a good chunk of talent. UMBC, I actually think still has some talent, but you have a coaching change there. What does that look like? Albany's kind of always in the mix. So to me, Binghamton's the standard bearer, and it's somebody else's job to knock them off their perch at this point. And I really like the talent core they have returning. The MAAC, Marist is still the standard bearer there. That conference gets a little more interesting just because of what Marist graduated. I think they're going to have to answer some questions in the circle, and I think they need some extra step out performers on the offense to stay as consistent as they were last year. To me, the one that I like in the MAAC as maybe a sleeper is Iona. And you might say I'm crazy because it's an Iona team with a new coaching staff, new head coach, and a pitching staff with a lot of question marks. I like that Iona team. Maybe I'm out on an ice-covered limb again, but I like that Iona team. So that's my pick to be the sleeper in the MAAC. There are some pitchers in the MAAC, and Alyssa Weinberg at Fairfield, a Sam Kowalski at Sacred Heart, that I think could be difference makers for their programs. Probably keep their programs towards the top tier of the MAAC. But to me, Iona is the sleeper. That's the one that maybe nobody sees coming that I think could be a difference maker there. And then the Northeast Conference, I mean, you have that's where like Division II teams in the Northeast go to realign. So there's so many programs that are still in that process. Long Island is the favorite. They should be. I don't have a lot of faith in St. Francis this year. Apologies to the Red Flash, but I mean, you lost your coach, you lost your coaching staff, you lost so much of your team because of the Division III move that admittedly blindsided everybody involved outside of a certain few in leadership at the school. So I just think that they moved to D3 next year, but I don't have a lot of faith for St. Francis this year. So to me, Long Island returns the biggest core. They return the most talent from last year, and they won the regular season last year. Oh, by the way, dealing with coaching situations, an interim head coach, injuries on the roster and things like that. So to me, the state of New York, all three of those conferences revolve around them. I think Binghamton's the standard bearer in the America East. It's Marist until somebody beats them in the MAAC, and it's Long Island's to lose in the Northeast.
And finally, we wrap up SWAC and MEAC. SWAC, Jackson State's the defending champions. They gave LSU all they can handle last year. Kind of got lost in the shuffle in that Baton Rouge regional, but they hung themselves very well. They've played Alabama well in regionals. I mean, this is a team. Jace Jackson's a kid to watch. 55 RBIs for them. FAMU arguably could have been the best regular season team. They do the two division thing in the SWAC and whatever. I say whatever. But FAMU, they've done a nice job in the post Veronica Wiggins era there, turning things around. I know they've had some coaching changes there. Bethune-Cookman, Laura Watton still there. And then the MEAC, Howard, the defending champs, Tori Tyson winning that conference championship. I know you got to talk to her for a fall report there. What's your thoughts, what she had to tell you about her team and, of course, once again, the favorites in the MEAC?
The thing I think I like about Howard the most, they were really solid last year, got a good freshman class that they like. They're going to rely on some pieces of it. And then Tori Tyson went out and just casually added the MEAC Player of the Year via transfer, just for good measure. I think, she did. Taylor Ames Alexander's now at Howard after playing Howard in the conference championship game last year as a member of South Carolina State. I like what Tori Tyson's done with that Howard roster. It's not easy to be consistent without something to write home about. And for the longest time, the last 4 years, Howard only had one NCAA tournament appearance to write home about. Morgan State won the regular season. I think it was 4 years in a row, three out of 4 or 4 years in a row. But Howard was steady. Tori Tyson built that program. They make the NCAA tournament last year. And if you think about it, if you look and you pay attention and you watch the games and you look at what Howard's made of, when they got to the postseason, each of the last 2 times under Tyson, they've been solid. Final scores might be what they are, but I remember them hanging with Florida State down in that regional a couple of years ago. Like, they've been solid. It's not just, oh, well, they're the MEAC champs, so they're going to get the tournament. The one thing I hate about the NCAA basketball tournament is the small conference champions have to play each other to make it in to be able to have the privilege of playing the 1 seed. That's not been Howard. Even when they've lost games, they've been competitive. And for a program still building up to consistency, that's a key. So I actually really like Howard this year. I think they got stronger. They were good last year. You add Ames Alexander, big power bat. I think they got stronger. And then you mentioned the SWAC. Like, it's funny about Jackson State. They finished second in their own division each of the last 2 years and then won the conference tournament. So you go to Baton Rouge 2 years ago. You mentioned it, competitive with LSU. You go to the Tuscaloosa Regional last year. You lose. I think it was a 1-run game to Belmont to get eliminated.
That's great memory. 2-1, by the way. That's a heck of a memory. It was 2-1
yeah,
game.
like two solid performances in the postseason in SEC home ballparks against quality competition. I actually am really curious what Prairie View A&M looks like this year. I don't want to not mention them in the SWAC because they lost some key pieces of their roster last year. They've just run crazy over the West Division and the SWAC the last 3 years. I think they've lost like 6 total games in conference the last 3 years in the divisional play. But they lost some key pieces last year, and to help supplement for those losses, help bridge the gap, casually all they did was go out and pick up Kayla Adams from Arkansas Pine Bluff, who has been really solid in the circle. Like, she was the shining star of that Pine Bluff team. ERA under 2.5 each of her first 2 years, if memory serves. So you lose your ace pitcher if you're Prairie View, and you go out and you get the ace from a conference competitor. Is Vernon Bland going to miss a beat? Like, they've lost 6 games in conference, like I think it was, in 3 years. I mean, that's not changing. You just reload it.
That's it, folks. Every conference. We broke it down. Maybe a little longer than we thought, but it tells you we talked to a lot of people. We have a lot of information we're feeding you. You can listen to this not just for this week, but you can listen to this throughout the year as mid-majors, as the season plays itself out. What do we end up? We talked to every Power 4 school. We talked to over 100 schools. I mean, we covered all. Tell the audience what they can expect D1 softball from a mid-major coverage and just overall coverage.
So overall, we just finished our preseason coverage. I believe the number was 105 fall reports on 105 different teams, every Power 4 team, and conference previews on all 31 Division I conferences in written form, which means you didn't have to hear my accent talking about them. You could read it. If you read it in my accent, though, extra points for you. But no, like, we just finished our preseason coverage, as expansive as you're going to find anywhere. Mid-major wise, since that's our focus today, like, we started that mid-major rankings, ranking 25 teams last year, very similar to a normal top 25, and we really are. I know our group, and Eric, I know you and I were both in this camp. We loved it, but we also found that the teams, the players, and just mid-major softball fans loved it. So we're keeping the mid-major rankings going this year. We did a top 100 mid-major only player ranking preseason this year. We did a postseason one last year. We'll do that again this year. So we're expanding our mid-major specific coverage. We'll have some notebooks during the year. Like, we love, I'm a mid-major guy. I don't know how many of you that are listening to this, or God forbid, watching this on YouTube, bless you. But like, my bread and butter for 15 years is the mid-majors. I'm a mid-major guy. And so getting to expand our mid-major coverage last year, and then again, even more this year, it's my favorite thing. I'm not going to pretend it's not. It's my favorite thing. And I'm honestly pumped for some extra stuff that we haven't unveiled yet, but that's coming, that I think is going to be even more fun too.
Shout out Womblero. He always asks for this episode in this particular show. So, Justin, always a pleasure. I know you're going on your way to Florida. The good news is we started this show. It was really cold. By the time this show has ended, it's warming up, and that's a good thing. As we get ready, I will be a deal there, sir. Have a good, safe travels. We will reconnect again for our traditional Super Bowl Monday show. While everybody's partying, watching the Super Bowl, Justin and I are breaking down week 1 of the season. That's what's true.
Nothing like it.
Oh boy! Thanks, Justin. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks.